G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 6 of True Blue Conversations with your host Adam Bloom, the author of Easy Target, now available at adambloom.com.au. 8 years ago, after returning from 3 tours of Afghanistan and then gaining experience and education in financial planning, Warren Loudon teamed up with fellow veteran Dave Vaughan and started Loudon & Vaughan Private Wealth, founded with the underlying belief that every person matters and every dollar counts, providing comprehensive tailored financial advice and wealth management services for you and your family. Loudon & Vaughan will guide you towards your financial goals with integrity and transparency. Whether you're planning for retirement, investing for the future, or managing your family's wealth, they've got you covered. Visit loudonandvaughan.com.au or call 02 9538 2704 to book a meeting with Warren today.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today I've got a very special guest. So this lady is a veteran. She is a wife of a veteran and also a mum, and she served both full-time and reserves for 20 years. That's right. Yep, 20 years. But her story is one, it's very different because it's not the ordinary veteran story. And today I'm joined by Emma Donaldson, and Emma is the wife of Mark Donalson VC. But as I've mentioned at the start, Emma is a veteran herself, and this is Emma's story. And Emma, it's an absolute privilege to have you on True Blue.
Thank you very much, Adam. I'm half looking forward to it.
Well, we've done the formal bit. Now we can. Now this is just relaxed, and we can just have a chat. So, as I mentioned, Em, you're a veteran, and now you do your advocacy work, which we'll get into later on in the podcast. But before we get into Em the soldier, let's go back to a young Emma. Talk me through life growing up when you were little.
Yeah. So I think going all the way back, I was actually born in England, in Nuneaton. My dad was from working class in England and mum was from the upper class. And from there, when I was a year old, Dad decided to go to New Guinea. So we moved from England to New Guinea, which was obviously a big thing for my mum, which I can only recognise now. But, I went from being a baby to growing up to the age of 7, growing up in New Guinea, which was a really different lifestyle and I think quite different and unusual. And I distinctly remember we went back to UK once and my mum landed on the plane and we jumped on the escalator. Well, we got to the escalator at Heathrow, which was a massive airport. Mum's jumped on the escalator and just gone down, and I've gone into a mad panic, at which point I've been left up the top of the elevator screaming as a 5-year-old because I'd not seen an escalator, I hadn't seen an elevator, I hadn't seen anything Western like that. But for Mum, it was something new. So I think that was the sort of, that identity piece where I was just like, oh my God, this is all so different to me. And then we moved from there to Adelaide. So Dad worked for a brewery in New Guinea. And then when we moved to Adelaide, he worked for Cooper's Brewery, good beer. So we moved there. And then I was, at 7, I'd gone from being one white kid in a whole school to being, there was actually no one of colour at the school at all. And, it was a real different sort of upbringing for me, and we bounced around a bit as Dad changed jobs. So I think, I never really had that sense of being settled. So, that's where I spent most of my life in the end. Growing up was that next period of time was in Adelaide. And
for you, as you say, it's different going to New Guinea, as you don't have the luxuries that you have afforded to you in England, and so growing up, it would have, for you, it is a different upbringing to a normal upbringing back in England.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it was that classism. We were in a gated community with a couple of other English people who had jobs, but it was that different outlook. You had people who were paid as your nannies, as your gardeners. It was like a whole biracial and class difference that, was what my norm was, but wasn't what the norm was.
And did you find that you're, like, growing up with the locals in New Guinea, what was that like? Because there's obviously a language barrier. Do you remember much about that?
Yeah, not that I would, don't test me on it now, but I spoke fluent Pidgin English as a kid. So when I actually came to Australia, it was trying to learn English in the traditional English speaking when, all I'd grown up with was Pidgin.
Yeah, so, right. And do you have any brothers and sisters, or are you...
No, it's just me.
Yeah, right.
Just me.
So you grow up, and what were you like at school? Were you pretty academic? Or?
I bounced between being really academic and being the class clown and kicked out of class. So it was definitely, every single report card was could excel if she actually put in an effort.
It seems to be there's a recurring theme here with veterans and first responders that if applied self could do better or could either end up in jail or so you academic or class, which we all were. I was the same, and well, unfortunately for me, I wasn't gifted in the learning ability, but I became the class clown because you act out. So you do. And were you sporty?
I was. So I played rugby growing up. So my parents, being British, found ourselves in a little community of British. So we grew up playing rugby union up until about the age of...
Good sport, Em.
Yeah,
good
it was. Up until the age of 14, and then I was no longer able to play because I was a girl, and then they realised there were differences in physicality.
Yep.
So at that point I joined and I started playing with the Adelaide Jets in the female team.
So what position did you play?
So I was a winger at the time.
Okay, yeah, right. I was prop and breakaway. So I love rugby.
Yep.
Rugby, played it at school, so that good hard game. And so what's that like now? Because you've got your English heritage. Are you a Wallaby or are you still English?
100% English.
Yeah. They probably play better anyway.
It is a definite thing in the house. So I bring out my English roses. In fact, I even brought for the last games that were on, I brought a Lions jersey. So anyway.
Hey, it's the homeland. You got to support. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when you moved to Adelaide, and then growing up now, you've had a really interesting upbringing in New Guinea and now Adelaide. And are you looking at joining defence, or what? Like, did you have any family members that had served, and where did the interest to join defence come from?
So I think it's twofold. So yes, I did. My dad was in the British Navy, and apart from a really bad drinking habit and terrible tattoos, I don't know what else it gave him because he never really talked about it. But my childhood wasn't amazing. My parents did what they could, but they both, had a life that revolved around alcohol and not necessarily me. So in that, there was a want and a need to escape. And I think, I've mentioned it before to other people, I think there was, at that time, Tour of Duty was on telly, great soundtrack, absolutely love that TV, along with MASH. And I think there was, to be fair, there was that whole looking and watching and going, and I think my driving force was I really wanted to be a nurse like they were on telly.
You know what, Em, it's funny you say that because I watched MASH as a kid, and it still holds up to this day. And I went back the other day and started rewatching it again, and because it's such a great show, and who wouldn't want to join and be, do what the MASH guys did?
Yep.
And so you join up in 1994, and talk me through the process of but you actually joined the reserves before you joined up full time. Is that correct?
Yeah. So at the time I was at school, so I was a checkout chick at Woolworths, and then I wanted to... So Mum had pointed out that I could do the Army Reserves, which is tax-free money. So the idea was I'd go do that, and it was with the Adelaide University Regiment. I think Mum was hoping that if I at least paraded with them, maybe I would want to go to uni. It didn't help. So I was doing that while I was in Year 12. During Year 12, even though I could have done really well, I chose not to do really well, and I found every other activity to do apart from going to school. And I had applied to go to Duntroon. So during this period, I'd had really good scores in year 11. So they had said, yep, I'd done all the officer testing. I'd been selected for that, but it was awaiting my score results, which I knew at that time were going to be poor. So sure enough, the results came in. They selected, and I wasn't not selected. So, but they only took 3 from Adelaide, and I think I was number 6 on the list or whatever. But they said to me, look, wait till next year, and then you can go to RMC, or if you like, there's a bus here now, pretty much. It felt like, here's a bus and you can go to Kapuka.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, right, okay, so if I jump on that bus, and they were like, you can always change over, you can be an officer, like they tell you everything. You can be an officer later. But for me, I was like, you know what, there's a bus, there's an escape from my childhood, my home, and there's an income. I'm getting on that bus.
Yeah, right. And so you join in 1994.
Yeah.
Political correctness doesn't exist back then
Yeah.
as it does now, and as we record in 2025. That process of joining back then, the internet's not around, so
Yeah.
kids today wouldn't know that there wasn't internet back then, and so you join up. And what do you remember of your time at Kapuka? Was this the shock and awe of being young and like the political correctness doesn't exist? Well, talk me through Kapuka.
So I legitimately jumped on a bus in Adelaide, and we had a really lovely corporal. His name was Corporal Green. He was on the bus with us, and we drove from there, picked up some other people in Melbourne, I believe, and then we went to Wagga. And then we literally drove in the gate, the bus parked, and then this corporal just unleashed. So this lovely person who'd been with us for days suddenly yells at us, and I'm like, I'm actually not quite sure what I've signed up for. And there's this, and I joined at the time, so I was the second last all-female platoon. So there was 40-something of us get off the bus, and it was all female, so female sergeants, female corporals, in fact, one of the corporals is now, was RSMA, so Kim Fellingham was
right.
one of my corporals at Kapuka.
Wow.
So, it was a really interesting time of my life, because I think, they take 3 months to train a soldier, but I think for me, it was a real switch and a change of female identity in that sort of piece, because, it was a pack mentality of, the weakest person is the weakest chain in the link. And, I remember having to wheel around on a hill and butt stroke a woman because she wasn't keeping up with it, something that you just wouldn't think of these days. You wouldn't hear.
Oh, of course
and it was,
not. That was the norm.
Yeah, it was the norm. And it was, and we were isolated. We weren't even allowed to talk with the blokes, which is why, thank God the padres were there, because we had church on a Sunday where you could actually talk to the other recruits, and we were so isolated. And I even got extras, and I got 4 days extras because I spoke to a bloke in the queue to put our dishes in the sink, and he was like, hey, how are you, how's your day? And I said, yeah, it's great. And that was it. I was on, I can't even remember, ROPs for 3 days in a row because of it.
Because you spoke to a
because I spoke to a male recruit.
Wow, that's.
And then, I think the other funny story from, we had, and this is where I was really thankful, because I was trying not to let everyone know I was a reservist, because that was the worst thing you could do. But when we got there, we had 2 minutes. You had to put your hair in a ponytail, and you had to put it in a bow, and you had 1 hair tie, 1 bun net, and 2 pins. And then they came and they shook it, and if it didn't stay on your head, they just chopped your hair off. Then and there.
Wow, far out. And did you, because so many of the guys and girls that I've had on, did you iron the sheets and everything as well? Did you? And sleep on the floor to say,
Yeah. It was absolute. Yeah, it was funny, and I still to this day fold my socks with a smiley face on them. So.
And now, do you still do your hospital corners now?
I do. Yeah. Mark and I argue about it because Mark obviously served, and he intentionally just pisses me off and will fold it the opposite direction just to drive me mental.
Well, you learn these things and they stick.
Yep.
And so, because how old are you at that point when you go to Kapuka?
So 18.
18. So, like you say, you've grown up in New Guinea, then Adelaide. You're entering into the real world now. This is, it's not wipe your nose and you're an adult. You're going into like the real world. And were you corps allocated, or could you choose back then?
So back then you had a want but they did it as allocation. So whereas now they'll hold someone over and go, okay, the next IET for that course is this one, so we'll put you on Kapooka here. It was we'll just train people and then find out. So it was about 3 weeks before the end of Kapooka. We did another aptitude test. And that aptitude test, they were like, okay, so I think we had 2 SIG positions, 4 clerk, and then the rest were all ordnance for QEs, quartermasters, that sort of thing. So, and that was it. Whereas, the male platoon who was on the bottom of that whole platoon went to infantry. Yeah, there was no ifs or buts, regardless of any skills. They were like, right, next thing's infantry, and they're all going. I was like, thank God I wasn't on that one. So you go to Sigs, and for you march out of Kapooka, proud moment. Do you get your mum and dad over to see you march out? Yeah, I do. They do come, and then I gave them my VCR of my march out, at which point mum recorded over that a few years later, so I've got no proof that I ever marched out of Kapooka.
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, they did, but it was one of those, because we'd had such a funny relationship as growing up, there wasn't that acknowledgement. Mum literally said, I think you're being bloody stupid and this is a dumb idea. So there was no congratulations, we're so proud of you.
Yeah.
But, they did come over. So, yeah.
And for you, are you looking back now, Em, are you looking back going, wow, actually I did something for the first time for me? And are you looking back on that now going, it's a proud moment that I did achieve, because Kapooka's tough. And from what I've heard, it's not easy. So to march out and do something on your own, are you looking at that going, yeah, actually, I've actually done something, and I feel like I'm grown up now?
Yeah, I think it was a really empowering move for me because, I realised that I was physically capable. I was able to learn. I was able to pick things up with, I'd sort of had that narrative my whole life that I was probably not really great at anything, and I was actually achieving something. I was putting my mind to something, and I was pretty good. Not as good as my husband who got all the awards, but I was, at least in the top.
Of course, yeah. And for you, like fitness, obviously, you love fitness now. Have you always been like you played your sport and everything? So you didn't find the fitness side too challenging when you're at Kapooka?
No, to be fair, the beginning half I didn't. But I can't remember what you call it. They do a 3-day final bush phase where you go out and just get smashed for days on end. And on that, I managed to do an injury to my kneecap and a ligament, landing on a cow patty out of all the things in the world. So we were doing a fire and move, and I've landed on this cow patty, which wasn't soft, it was rock hard, and managed to... So that last week and a bit, I had this really nagging knee injury. And from there was getting absolutely beasted, because no longer was I at the front of the pack, and I was a real hindrance to the group. So, there was that grit and determination. So I did get that, what it's like to be the weaker link in a chain.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that would have been... does that same knee still give you trouble now, Em?
Yeah, it does. And funnily enough, it wasn't until I went to the School of Sigs, and when I was at the School of Sigs, I'd been there about a week, and the PTI said something. He goes, just go to the RAP, it's fine, they will fix it. I'm like, I thought we just don't talk about these things. I'm like, and then I got treatment for it, and then, it's still... to this day is a pain in the neck.
Yeah, so it's that's a good point to highlight that. Yeah, sometimes it's not that if you're at the top of the pack and then it's not that you're being a malingerer. There's an actual issue, and as you say, that would have been to be at the top and then be the weak link. That would be hard. So you say you march out, you go and do if you go infantry, for our non-military listeners, you either go to Singleton, as that's your initial employment training. You chose to be a Sig, and where do you go? Where's training for you?
So I head off to sunny Watsonia in Melbourne, which isn't sunny.
Cold.
Yeah, it's cold. The band school was there, and 126 Signal Squadron
Yep.
were there as well. So, but we had to, because it didn't line up, we had 3 months in holding platoon, waiting for our course to start. So we were just doing all the bits and pieces at the school, move this from here, run this letter here, do whatever it was.
Yep.
But it was, it was interesting. It was at that period that you realise that corporals aren't God. They are just other people. They still think they're God.
Yeah,
but
the next couple of ranks up. Yeah. And
yeah.
Are you at that point, and I always highlight this, you joined in at, this is peacetime. So there's I think Somalia had happened the year before. There's really from Vietnam, there's a couple of deployments here and there, but you're joining up in peacetime. So it ramps up in the next part of your career. Yeah. But are you still, at this point with SIGs, are you still doing Morse code and things like that?
Yeah, so we are. So I did, when I went there, when I was told at Kapuka that I was going to Signals, they said I was going into computers. And I was like, oh, that's all right, that'll be great. I got there and I was an OPSEC. So it was radio operator and ComSen operator and the same thing. So at that point, this is where my skills did not get highlighted very well. So I had to learn Morse code, and not only did I have to learn Morse code, I had to learn to touch type, both skills that aren't amazing for me. And then we even had the opportunity where we needed to touch type Morse code. So as you listened to Morse code, you had to touch. I was like, not my greatest forte. And to be fair, I was very lucky. We had a guy who was really, really good at typing, not so good at Morse code. He fell asleep. Whatever it was, every time we did Morse code, he fell asleep. But once we got into the typing of Morse code, so he was amazing. Hats off, Chris, if you're still around. But he used to come in after night, and he, I think, qualified the entire course for us while we were all at the boozer. So, and he would come down to the boozer. I don't know how he used to contact. He must have. We had a runner, so the runner would come down to the boozer and go, right, Chris has qualified you, and then we'd have to climb back into the window, sit on the thing, and then get the DS to come and tick it off that we'd qualified.
Well, it's funny you talk about that because, and I wanted to highlight that because someone you know very well who's been a previous guest on the podcast, Harry Moffat, he went SIGs and he said it was interesting because he had to touch type, and he said, great later in life when you write books and you can, he said, and did you had speed tests and things as well? Yeah. He mentioned that as well, that you had to type, I think it was not whatever it was, or
and
ridiculous
it's like
words or something.
In civilian world is actually really pathetic. I think it was 20 words a minute or something, right. Which if you put that on a resume, no one is hiring you for your 20 words.
No, that's, because I sit there and like this and type away. So, and that's what he said. He goes, yes. And he said, look, mate, it was great. He said, mate, I was surrounded by women. So it's like, it was amazing. And he said, but touch type was, so I get what you mean by the touch type and more, and that, so, and what else, like, because, people pick up a radio and you can hear it, like, communication is everything. If you don't have communication in any form of being on a battlefield or being in as a first responder as well, and you can tell when people aren't great at it, and it's like they hold the mic off here and they talk, and it's like they sound like they're eating the mic. So are you learning like all the different call signs and everything? Is that what you?
Yeah. So we bounce between. So we learn all the radio suite. So at that time there was still in service a lot of the old Vietnam stuff. So we were learning, the 77 set radio as well as the new Raven radio that was all the rage at the time. So, we were bouncing between having to learn that, and then also the vehicle mounted, so how to set it up in a vehicle. So you had to learn how to, pack a pack so you could carry everything, and then vehicle mount so you could vehicle drive out and do things. So, it was actually really physical. So you're learning to be in a radio detachment that has 3 people to run 24 hours a day. So between you have to be able to, sustain the comms, make sure that you've got all the equipment that you need to do that, and put up, antennas and build, and do HF and VHF and
So interesting, like you're 18, so you're just lapping it up, give me more, and it'd be exciting to learn all these things that necessarily you wouldn't have, if you weren't in the army, you would have thought, I'm going to do that. And so you're learning all these things. And are you, like, because now, as you mentioned, you went through with the second last, like, all females. this is where you're actually intermixed, aren't you, with the males? And are they accommodating and like working alongside you, or is it still an us and them? Or
well, the funny part is, I think it was, you talk about the old school sort of thing. So the guys are pretty accommodating at that point. There is still a little bit of, are you feminine enough? Are you, that sort of part. But I think the funniest part is the women who had been in there longer. I distinctly remember we had one of the female sergeants came in, and there was, I can't remember, maybe there was 5 of us on the course, and she came in and she was like, do not get pregnant. Like, it was a whole lecture on don't flirt, no fraternising. Like, it was all this whole big, you need to stay in your lane, do not get pregnant, do not ruin your reputation, do not. So there was this whole sort of thing. And I think the other thing is really remembering too that, that physicality part is really, you need to be accepted, or that want and drive to be accepted by the males. So you're not isolated and, picked off as a weaker link.
And for you, are you thinking in your own head, Em, are you thinking, I just want to be the best at my job and do the best job possible that I'm here to do? Is that going through your head? That's part of it. But I think I was lucky enough that the radio part and the understanding of the job wasn't actually a problem for me, but it was, making sure that I could keep up with the guys at PT, making sure I could lift the generator in and out of the trailer myself, making sure I could, it was doing that sort of bit I think I had to work on the acceptance more than I had to work on the skills. Yeah, it makes sense. Like and most female veterans that I've had on say exactly the same thing. It's understood the skill, what we're going to do, but then had to work harder at the physical stuff to keep to match it with the guys and be part and be accepted. Oh no, she's not Jack, or she's not the feminine. Oh, I'm not. No, that's not me. I'll get in and do the work as well. So it makes sense. And is that your initial training? Is that 3 months you do that for?
No, I think so. I must have 94. I was at Kapuka, and then I managed to get to Townsville just in time for the K95, so it must have been a year.
Wow, yeah. And talk me through your first part, because you just mentioned that you get to, so you deploy, you are posted up to Townsville. Is that where you wanted to be posted?
Yeah, so I was really lucky that you get the choice preference of where you want to go. So I'd put down Canberra, Melbourne and Sydney as my posting preferences, and I then got Townsville. So
what was that like, going to Townsville?
Yeah, well, for starts, I was so naive to where Townsville was, and I was like, it's just north of Brisbane. Anyway, we're on the plane, and the plane goes for quite a long time, so it's obviously a long way north of Brisbane. And we're flying, and I'm like, oh my God, this is just a dry dust bowl in the middle of nowhere. We get off the plane and absolutely just get smashed by the heat and the humidity. Yep. And I'm like, I've grown up in Australia, in Adelaide and Melbourne, to suddenly find myself in Townsville.
Very different climates.
Yeah.
Do you look back now, and obviously you're a kid, but is Townsville's humidity similar to PNG? Yep. So, but you're younger, so you sort of remember it a little bit, but not as and it is. I've been to Townsville, and it smacks you in the face. Yep. It's like Fiji as well. You get off and you go and you need a shower because you're sweating. It's just the humidity is disgusting, and it's probably good for training, but that's about it. So, and back then, did they let you guys get from the southern states acclimatise to Townsville?
I can't remember, but I honestly think it was maybe not even a week. When we landed, most of the unit, because I went to 103 Sigs Squadron, which was the ready deployment force at the time, and they had already, majority of the unit had had gone to the training exercise in Darwin for K95.
Yep.
And they were like, well, you've got a week, you need to get ready and get in this car and drive to Darwin. So there was no acclimatising. It was,
wow.
Straight into...
you go to Darwin, which is hot as well, so you don't escape it.
For my first amazing deployment at RAF Base Tyndall. But anyway...
And what's that? Because what is K95? Is it just a big exercise for our non-military listeners? What was...
Yeah, so it was a big exercise with Air Force, Navy, us, and I'm pretty sure there were other countries, but naively at the time I honestly had no idea what it was. It was just a thing that we were going to and I had to go because somebody told me. So
the big army life.
But it was in the olden days, so I was lucky. I ended up not having to go in a car and I got to go in a Qantas plane because they could charter airplanes and we didn't have any air hostesses or any food, but they flew us there on Qantas, so it was very flash.
So you get in there and so you do that exercise. And how long are you up in Townsville for?
So I eventually leave Townsville in 99.
So you have a fair stint. You have a fair stint up there.
Yeah. So I went from being a Sig to a corporal in Townsville, and I did my subject courses up there. And to be fair, I think it was a really interesting time because there still weren't very many females. I can't even remember what year it was when that females could be on the front line. So it was, because it was a ready deployment force, it was there weren't many females in most of the positions. So I sort of found myself bouncing around. So, in my little group of 3, I was attached to one RAR for a period of time. 2nd 14th, I went on a really cool trip to New Zealand, which was the funniest trip I've ever been on because we went on an exchange, or the unit went on an exchange over there, and then we got there and all their stuff was broken. So we couldn't actually do the training. So they drove us up to Auckland and said, look, you've just got a week and a half, get back to the base before we leave and we'll do... So I was like, well, this is the best.
That's good. How good is that?
But it was a real eye-opening sort of thing of, and I think I've wrestled with it since my transition, which I know we'll get on, but is being a female in an all-male environment and what that means to me and where my own personal values now, were potentially jeopardised by, trying to play a character in an all-male environment.
And for you, I've just racked my brain, and so you were in Townsville when the Black Hawk disaster happened, and with 5th Aviation Regiment, and you would end up being attached and working with SASR. What was that like being in Townsville, and was that the first time that you'd been exposed to such loss in the wider Defence Force at that point?
Well, so we were on a training exercise at high range and saw from a distance the explosion in the sky.
Oh, wow.
So there was, quite a few guys from the R unit who ended up having to go on the clearance and, after the sort of incident itself. But, I think that was the first time, I had been lucky enough to work with a few of the guys, so quite a few of the Sigs. In fact, one of the guys who was a Sig with me at 103 went on to be the 2IC of the patrol where my husband was awarded the Victoria Cross.
Wow.
So, and there had been quite a few Sigs sort of went from 103 to 152. So, quite often we would help out with the training. So when they were doing up at the high range training area and they had that little town that they built, the SAS guys would come over, or chicken stranglers, I think we'd call them, would come and do their training, and we would always be enemy party for them. So, that was my first, what training can cost, I guess, is that sort of big piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took the regiment a long time to recover. I think they said it was like over hundreds of years of experience lost in those two, and the 5th Av guys as well that were lost. And it's interesting because I had a veteran on a little while ago he was in 5th Aviation Regiment and actually went on exchange over to the US and knew all the guys that were killed, and he actually left. And he said it was a real hard point for him because he'd gone over to the US, they'd all mourned the loss, and then when he came back a year later, everyone had moved on, and he said he actually never could. So shout out to Kev Humphreys, DSC, previous guest, and he said he just knew that something had happened, and you guys saw the explosion, and it's tragic, just tragic. And that's, so as you say, training, and I think, well, as you would eventually get to the SASR and attach to them, more die in training accidents than on deployment. So and that's, I wanted to highlight that because I was like, oh, you would have been up there. Yeah. So that happens, and then 99. Where are you off to after when? Yeah,
so obviously at the end of 99, Timor happens, and
World War Timor as it was. Yep.
You know, and that was probably going to be one of my first opportunities to do a deployment. That, without going into all the whys or hows, I was pregnant at the time. I ended up having an ectopic pregnancy and my tube exploded, which is sort of, I know it doesn't get onto this, but it ties into the rest of my life later on. But because of that, I had to have an operation and then was medically downgraded. So when my unit deployed, I wasn't able to deploy. But during that time, I then, because I was early pregnant, they'd given me a posting order to Brisbane. So even though I'd gone on to lose a baby, that's why I ended up posted to Brisbane.
And that would have been hard for you, and to lose. And thank you for sharing that, because it's tragic that you lost your baby. But every veteran I talk to, and same as first responder, you want to deploy. Like that's what you do. You join up to deploy. That. Like, you're facing, adversity of overcoming the loss, and then you're seeing your mates deploy. Is that like, are you going, oh, what's going through your head at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I've said it before that I think it's like, you study all your life at a uni degree that you want to do and you never ever get to do it. It's that same sort of thing. That's my whole purpose. My whole purpose is to serve my country and to deploy. And, I get that there was a health reason that took it away from me, but, I think there's a lot of veterans that end up in opportunities or in situations where they don't deploy and can't deploy, but not through any fault of their own. And I think that really ties into that veteran. Am I really a veteran if I never deployed overseas? Which I think is I have that mentality myself as well. But sometimes you just end up in places where you can't get deployed.
Exactly, and that's where I had a very close friend of mine. She used to she was a previous guest on the podcast, and she was a major, and she was in Army Intelligence, and she made it a big thing of giving the Defence Medal. So, and she always made a big thing where it's been cheapened now, and I hate that people say, oh, the Coca-Cola medal or the Thanks for Coming medal. Yeah. And she used to make a big thing of it, and she said to me when we were overseas together a few years ago, she said, Ads, I always used to make a big thing, because she said only 2% of Australians will ever wear that medal. And don't cheapen that medal, because some people, as you say, aren't in a position to deploy. They're just, their units never get an opportunity to deploy. It doesn't take anything away from their service. They still signed that on the dotted line that it could mean that they give their life. They signed a blank check. And sometimes I feel that it's great to highlight that, sometimes you're not in a position, don't cheapen your service because you didn't deploy. You just were unlucky that you didn't get to deploy. Yeah. So, and that's, I'd like to bring that in. So, and for you, that happens. And then where are you posted after this?
So I head off to a very exciting posting down to Brisbane at the Strategic Communication Centre. So it's sort of the interface centre where all the signals come in and go out in the trunking systems. And so it's it's part of my training. It's not really the most enjoyable part of my training, but it gave me an opportunity to do a half marathon and get back into physicality and recover from where I'd been.
Because how are you travelling mentally at that point? Are you okay? Or
yeah, I think there is that I was at the what felt for me the sharp end of the stick, and was in a really high performing unit, had the opportunity to go overseas. That was taken away, and that was probably the bigger part than losing pregnancy at the time was that sort of, that part of it. And then, I was, self-doubt whether the Defence Force was for me, whether I wanted to stay in or what my service was going to look like.
Because you told me off air, and sorry to cut you off, and I said I wouldn't do that, but you think about joining the police here at this point too, isn't it? This is where you think about going down that path.
Yeah, and I'm like, I know I'm going to be stuck at this posting for 3 years. There's going to be no chance of and the chance of going to war or going on operation was, I'm like, well, fucking I've missed that, and I was like, I still want that need for service, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll become a police officer. Apparently I wasn't suitable because I hadn't studied enough. So, that I was bouncing around with what that was going to look like. So,
which and I know most veterans come to that, like, it's like a crossroad of, well, do I turn right? Do I turn left?
Yeah.
Do I go straight? Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Because you've still got that, and the driving force is service, and that's why you joined. You joined up for service, and most veterans and first responders that I've spoken to, it's service. Yeah. It's giving of service and a sense of purpose, belonging. So you do that, and then this is where your career does, and I think most people's careers does a complete, like, let's turbocharge, because 9/11 happens.
Yeah.
What do you remember of that day? And did you think that, looking back now, did you think that we would be involved in our longest war, and obviously you would end up where you ended up attached to the SAS?
Yeah, I didn't, I just remember waking up in the morning, trying to get up early before PT, and we turned on the telly, and then we had a look, and, just watching it for the first time, and just, I think we turned it on in time to see the first building collapse and the plane go into the second building, whatever that combination was, and, phones going off, coming to work straight away. I was at Enogra. By this time I was back in a field unit, but only a reserve field unit, but as full-time staff. So,
that was 139.
139.
Yep.
So, the chances of me deploying were still none, but it was still a lockdown, the whole barracks, don't wear your uniforms into, and I think that was when we were banned from going grocery shopping in our uniform as well, was that same sort of period of time, and it was, a lockdown, and I went into work, and we're not sure what's going to happen, lockdown, bring all your stuff because you're not leaving the base, was, the story. And, didn't know what that was going to look like. But I remember phoning Mum just to let her know that she wouldn't hear from me. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, Mum lived in Adelaide. She's very anti anything technology.
Naivety bliss, isn't it?
Yeah. And legitimately hadn't turned on the wireless or the radio as the rest of us call her. So actually it was 12 o'clock lunchtime. She had no idea at all that the buildings that I'm like, the buildings, trade centre, terrorists. She's like, oh. So, yeah. But, it was at that point there was another guy who was at the unit who had been at 126. So, and I think that was my, there had always been these little tiny connections to guys who had joined the SF as radio operators and I was like, you know what, I'm looking down the barrel of doing my sergeant's courses. I'm going to be a sergeant. I'm going to go into a training wing and I'm going to disappear. There's no opportunities. And at that time, SASR had looked at changing. So they had females, then they got rid of females, and so there'd been a period of time where they hadn't had them. And there was an opportunity for females who were recommended to apply could go over. So, my training officers at the time, because I worked in the training wing, selected me and I was allowed to apply. So I applied and was selected and was allowed to travel over there. So,
and this is where for you, as we've said, SF is a different world. It's different from regular army. It's very, and it needs to be. And you, as you said, and you said it earlier on the podcast, where you thought you were at the sharp end.
Yeah. But
this is the sharp end. So you're now, so after leaving 139, you post over to 152 Signal Squadron with the SASR. What was that like? Was that eye-opening of this is the SF world?
Yeah, well, I think I remember it was a whole heap of funny sort of occurrences. So there was no accommodation for me on the base because they hadn't had females there for a long period of time. So I had to stay at Freo at a base down there until I could find somewhere to move into. But, you know, I remember going to the mess on the very first day, and I've walked into this mess, and it is just full of guys in uniforms. And I've walked in, and I'm like, oh, I've never felt so uncomfortable in my entire life. And then I'm looking around, and I was like, you know what, I'm pretty young. There's going to be a whole bunch of really, really fit hot males. And I'm not saying that they weren't fit, but there was a whole heap of different shapes and sizes, and I was like, oh, I thought I was going to be in a calendar of like really hot men, but they're all, you know, and it was, you know, the biggest takeaway I think was how welcoming those guys were. Like I've honestly never felt so protected and so part of a group. They did nothing to alienate me, you know, and it was phenomenal.
And who would have thought, if you had a crystal ball, to see that a lot of those guys would become family moving forward. And so you get to, and being there and being away from regular army, is the standard, it's that much higher, and have you got to put have you got to set higher standards for yourself to be, because you're now attached to this, like this 152, it's different to any other SIG regiment that you've been at before.
And I think the biggest first step for me was then having to do the radio course. So it's a separate course, a Special Forces SIG course that's on top of that, and it's you get to really think outside the box. So, you know, it's in the olden days, I don't know if you remember, cars used to have the heater that run through the back windscreen.
I do, yes.
With the wire.
I do, yeah.
But it was about, you know, park the car in this direction, pop the boot. You can use that as a radio antenna to transmit signals.
Yeah, right.
Like there's all these sort of cool different things that I would never have done as a normal SIG. There was a whole heap of radios that we had, you know, and I went on to have the opportunity to learn weapons that I would never have learned as a SIG in another unit. You know, be a part of, you know, and there was was lucky enough at one point. So I went into the vault for the majority of my time doing all the signals and the data, so the fills for the radios that mean they can communicate securely. So that was sort of my main part. And I think, you know, I then found myself at one point when the boys were doing CT, so they would be on team. So when they would have the, you know, the deployed guys and then the on-team guys. So I found myself part of the CT and on team with the Signal Squadron for a little bit of period of time, which makes me laugh because now I've got these medals and I've got this, you know, service medal without a red thing, but I've got a CTSR like clasp on it. And everyone's like, I'm like, yeah, I know, don't ask.
And at this point, because what year did you go over to Perth?
So I went over in it would have been, when was it, 2002?
So right when Afghanistan, the first rotations were going through.
Funnily enough, was when a fair few guys were coming back from Iraq.
Oh,
so
right.
there were guys, there's SIGs there. So I guess, you know, I was part of the SIGs, not part of the regiment. So, you know, but there were SIGs who were deployed with the boys. And so I was, and this will tie in later, but this is where I was getting first-hand information of what it was like to deploy, some of the things that they'd seen, some of the things that they'd been up in, the situation they'd found themselves in, you know, and then the regiment was sort of at that stage where they were like, or maybe we need to, you know, so some guys had got out and gone overseas and started doing
contracting.
Yep. But, you know, it was like, well, do we bring back in the contracted or the guys that were contracted because they might actually have some skills that they can teach and do training for the guys. So, you know, it was a pretty exciting time, I guess, in you know, the regiment's history. And
are you thinking at this point, now that you're attached, this is your best chance to deploy? Or?
Well, no, still we still weren't able to go. But for me, personally, it was my best chance to be as involved as I could operationally without deploying. So, you know, liaising with the Americans, making sure the communication systems are all set up, doing all that sort of stuff so the guys could jump in and get all their things.
Yeah,
so,
right.
You know, doing it from the safety of Australia, absolutely, but still having those opportunities.
Of course, yeah. And is, like, as you said, like when it was opened up, is there a whole lot of females over there with you at this point, or?
I think there was a couple of. There might have been maybe 4 of us, I think. At the time.
Okay, yeah.
So, and I think initially because it was in, Iraq was here and Afghanistan was here, I think when they opened it up, it was more in the surveillance work. So that was the idea of was bringing the females in to do this surveillance jobs.
Yeah, right. And you're now starting to get these reports of, troops in contact and all this stuff, and it's starting to get busy, and it's now it's going to get very busy.
Yeah,
and we'll talk about Mark a little bit later on, but when did you first meet Mark, and what was your first impressions of him, and did you think that your future husband would go on and become a Victoria Cross recipient when you first met him, looking back?
Yeah, so that was, God, I must have it written down somewhere. When was that? 2002. So when Mark was in Townsville, and then he came in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So we met in June 2004. So I think he'd finished selection that January and had started his Rio cycle. But so mates of mine were on the selection course. So they were on the same selection course as Mark, and they'd become friends. So my SIG friends, who were now on the Rio cycle,
yep.
One of them was having a birthday, and he had a big evening at the Little Critters Hotel, and Mark came to that, and Mark and I just coincidentally ended up sitting next to each other, and we bonded over hanging shit on this guy. So that's what we sort of bonded, and then we sort of spent most of that night bantering together. I went home, at which point Luke then came back to my place because it was easier. I lived in Freo. It was easier to come back, cheaper to come back to my place, and I give everyone a lift to work in the next morning than it was to take a taxi. So Luke rocked up and he goes, and I've bought you this, and there's Mark, drunk as, and he's now stolen one of those 10-litre jerrys of water off, go in a drink machine at a office, and he goes, I've brought you this gift. And that was my very first gift from him, and it was love at first sight from that moment onwards.
Because I've seen a video of him where he said he met you and went, I'm in trouble here. I've found someone I really want to spend the rest of my life with, and for you this is.
Yeah, well, to be absolutely honest, I'd asked him to come home with me earlier on in the night, and then he goes, I've just brought a round of drinks, so no. So he actually knocked me back.
Oh, geez, who would have thought, happily married now, still.
Yep.
But it's funny because, as you say, you look at, Victoria Cross recipients, and you can't tell. He's a jovial guy that is drunk, and that's the first impression. And so this is when now, and this, as I said, and this is why I'm glad you've come on, because you were apprehensive at first, and you did say no at first. You're like, no, I'm not coming on, and then I was persistent, and I got you on, and this is why, because now you're becoming the partner of someone who is in the Special Forces and is deploying a lot. This is the balancing act of you're still attached, and this is Mark now deploying, going through, or
so he was. So literally the next morning after that, I drove back to the base, and it was the day the unit got the citation, and John Howard had come over. So I was doing a parade, and Mark jumped on a plane and went to para course. So he was doing down at para school for that. Then he came back. I went to Thailand on a training thing with the group that I was working with, and then he went on survival course. So it was literally like that. And we're talking on the phone, we're text messaging, we're kind of in a relationship, but haven't actually seen each other in person for months, or it felt like, it must have been about 2 months. And then we caught up, went down to Margaret River, and sort of decided that we would have a relationship. But that, I should have seen the writing on the wall that I was going to have a relationship with someone who was going to never be there right back then. So, but, I don't know whether we were stupid or the time was right or whatever it was, so we'd met in June, brought a house together in November of that year.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And then, I think it was September that year, he was fully qualified. and became qualified. And I can't really remember the dates, but just before the first deployment to Afghanistan, he went on a PSD where Dave Neary died.
Yep, I know the time. That was 2005.
I want to say, 2000,
I'm pretty sure it was 2005.
Yep. So, and funnily enough, back into, me, and to be fair, I'm not a breeding machine. So we were pregnant, and Mark was going to deploy on this PSD, and he took off, and then he phoned me on the day and was like, hey, Dave's died, we're staying here, we're going to do the job. And I'm like, okay. So I'm trying to rationalise that on the same day I've just had a miscarriage. And wow. I'm like, he's not asked, now's not the time to bring it up. So there's this whole, there becomes this dynamic in the relationship of me keeping things in or away from him that I think are going to take his mind off the job and what he needs to do.
So you're compartmentalising things in your own space, and I can see that would be. I don't want to take him away from his job because he's doing, and because you're a signaller, the dangerous job he's doing. That you want him to be focused so that you can get him home safe. Yeah, and I see that would be a hard thing to hey and. At this point for you, are you thinking, because you've had your ectopic pregnancy, and now you've had a miscarriage, are you thinking, I'm not going to have kids? It might not happen for me?
I haven't got to that stage yet. That definitely happens a little bit later on. We're blessed, luckily, at beginning of 2006, I fall pregnant, and then I think it must be April that year, Mark deploys for the first time to Afghanistan. So I fall pregnant, he deploys, he gets back about 2 weeks before the pregnancy. So isn't there for part of that sort of journey. And then after Kaylee, we go on to have another ectopic pregnancy, or a few more miscarriages, an ectopic pregnancy and IVF, and trying to balance IVF treatment and overseas deployments to Afghanistan and training regimes and stuff. So I definitely was not a breeding machine, but we've been blessed, got 2 kids, and thank you.
And is that for you, and I know that's a hard thing to talk about, and for you and my brother and sister just lost their little baby, stillborn, and it's been so I take, and for you to share that, I really appreciate it, because it's hard. To lose a child it's terrible. And are you, as you've just mentioned, are you just compartmentalising that and putting that, and this will come up in later on in your transition of it all hits at once later on when you transition. So that in itself, you've now got Mark's deploying into the most dangerous place in the world. You're receiving these, you're receiving the reports. You're getting them contact, troops in contact, and for the non-military listener, PSD is personal security detachment.
Yep.
Yeah, so Mark was essentially attached to a high-valued asset. We'll leave it at that. So I know what it is, Em, but for the non-listener, that's what PSD means. Yep. So you're getting these reports. Are you now you're pregnant and you're soon to become a mum. Are you now starting to worry that he might not come back?
I think it was, it wasn't, I don't know what point that sort of shifted for me, but it was a definite sort of shift. And I think it was, I really found it hard to rationalise when, having been a member of the regiment, even as a Sig, to have seen, I knew they were highly qualified, I knew they were really capable, I knew they had the training, I knew, so the rational part of me knew that. But sometimes I really wish I had the naivety that some of the other wives had. Not saying that they're all naive, but knowing that it's actually a dangerous job. Everything, they do is dangerous. And I think, back in those days, we didn't even have communications. Postage took for, World War II people wouldn't think it took forever, but for us it felt like forever. And, it'd be a month 2 months between getting a letter, or me sending a package and he wouldn't get one, and he would send a letter and then I would send, and then he would try and ring on an MRSAT radio. Now, on a phone, I don't know if you've ever tried to have a conversation on one of them. It is.
They are crap. Yeah, crap.
You know, so there was that, really back to that whole compartmentalising, that every time something went wrong, I didn't have the opportunity to tell him, or I couldn't. So, you know, I think it damaged our relationship, and I think a lot of married couples would probably realise this sort of thing. When you can't rely on your partner, and it's not because Mark's not reliable, and it's not because he wasn't, you know, isn't that person, it's because he was not accessible. There was no way I could have done it. So I had to rely purely on myself and, you know, friends around me, that I think really sort of sets up a really strange dynamic in a relationship.
Well, you've got a job back here to do. Like, you've got to run the day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Like, life doesn't stop because your partner's on deployment, and that's like whether it's a female on deployment or the male's on deployment. Life doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Like, it's still, you've got bills to pay. You've got, you know, and you're pregnant, so you know, like, life doesn't stop, and we're going to talk about, you know, that routine and that a little bit later. And the regiment's starting to lose guys over there. Are you, and back then, I know that comms go black, and for you, even though you're a Sig and attached, does your heart stop every time thinking, oh shit, it could be Mark? Or
yeah, I think, you know, I think you sort of, I think it's the other way, actually. When comms go black and you haven't heard anything, I know it's not Mark, but I know it's somebody else. So I think that's the hardest part, is okay, I can try and it's that mixed thing of relief that it's not my partner, guilt that I know it's someone else's partner, and then for me, the loss of the guys that I'd actually served with. So I knew them personally as well.
Yep.
So trying to, you know, weren't just someone's husband. They were also someone I worked with, but they were also a husband of a friend. Like, it was a really, you know, it was a shit time.
Oh, of course, yeah. And this is what I want to highlight too in your podcast, is that you created your own friendships, not just on the back of Mark. Because you were attached and you had created your own friendships. So you knew these guys, and you got there before Mark did. So, you know, I want to highlight that. So, yeah, and that would be, and later on we're gonna talk about, like, we're going to talk about that with the wives and the partners, and how important that group is, and the connection. Did you find it sometimes, though, a burden in that sense, that because you're a Sig, and they'd come to you and go, have you heard anything, Em? Or like,
yeah, I think to be fair, that the time, you know, and this is jumping back and forth, I get that, but the time that it became really problematic for me was when I wasn't treated as a wife, to be fair. So there was a period of Mark going on a few deployments down the track. He gets injured in an IED, and, you know, so as a result of that, I got the door knock. So I'm at home in our little house in Freo. I've got a baby. There's a knock on the door. I'm not expecting anyone. I open the door and there's two soldiers standing on the door, and I'm like, well, this fucking isn't great. You know, but I knew one of them, and the other one I didn't know. He was a younger officer who'd come in, and I was like, okay. But then they treated me like a soldier rather than like a wife.
Yep.
So, you know, at that point, they let me know that Mark was injured in an IED, that it had blown up, that they'd sent in I think Weeksy talks about this on your podcast.
Yeah, he
they'd
does,
sent in a chopper, the chopper crashed, and they're like, so that's it. And I'm like, okay, I feel like maybe you needed to have given me some more details on this, and
show a bit of emotion, maybe.
And show a bit of emotion, but, you know, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, 100% wrongly, I know it was wrong. I jumped in the car, went to work, logged on, and had a look at the Kazabak to see actually what had happened. So I had some more information prior to having to wait for the...
Yeah, right. And that's the thing, like, it's, as you say, like... And this has been the whole thing of, with doing the podcast and watching the Bravery and Betrayal documentary, where young and, well, he's still young, Keegan receives that. And it's something that I don't think the Army really, well, it was all new, that notifying families of that someone had been injured or killed. And I spoke to a couple of it, and they said, yeah, the Army kind of didn't really do that well. Like, it was not, and you've just experienced it. Oh, well, yep. He's been in an IED, it's blown up, and chopper, and well, can you tell me, is he okay? Like,
I think the regiment really, after Matt had passed, and hats off to his wife, because I know she really, really was instrumental in the changes, was being able to have a funeral the way you want to. So I think after that there was a big shift and a change. So the guys had a death plan that they would do. So they could then pick who would be the ones to tell their wife. Rather than just two randoms, they would say, I want these two guys from the regiment. They, got to pick their photo that would be up on the all that sort of part. So the regiment, I don't know if the wider Army did, and I can only talk to what I was part of. There was that sort of shift to be able to, pick who you want to carry your coffin, because I don't know if the military has a standard. Everyone has to be the same height carrying the coffin. Everyone has to, yada yada. But if you want his mates and they're not the same height, then how's that? So, there's a military way of doing things, and then the regiment was pretty good at supporting what was wanted, but that was only after having it done, with someone who had the skills to be able to navigate that system.
And for you, and I want to highlight this, you supported 7 deployments and the toll that has taken, like, that's a lot on, it's a lot of deployments that you have had to deal with, and especially for the kids too. And how are you? And we are jumping, but I feel in a podcast you can do that. That's the best thing about it.
Well, it's your podcast.
Yeah. So of course I can. Yeah. And when you became a mum, how are you going? Like, how are you coping mentally? Because Mark's away, and basically you're a single mum while he's away. How are you coping with being a new mum?
So I think this is where we bounce all the way back again. So by the time I have Kaylee, I've had Kaylee, or 2 weeks from having Kaylee, Mark comes back from deployment. So now we're trying to fix 5 months of disconnection, a pregnancy that he's not been part of, with us having a baby, when he hasn't had that opportunity to be connected from the pregnancy. Plus he's just come back from a fucking war zone, and what's that like? And then walks into a war zone of his wife having a baby. But anyway, so then we have Kaylee, but within, I think it was literally four weeks, he got came home. I had Kaylee, I was in the kitchen, he goes, hey, I've got to go. I'm like, what? You've just got back. And there was a thing in another country that he had to suddenly do a thing. And I'm like, well, great. But, so we're juggling that. But I'm also getting a posting order from Army. So, this is where everything sort of bounces. I get a posting order from Army. I need to go to the School of Signals. There's no more postings at SASR. I've already been there longer than I should have. Need to be a different rank. And this is what the School of Sigs, or Signal Corps, says I have to do. There's no postings for Mark. He's regiment. He's not leaving anywhere. He's not at the point where he can go to Swan Island, so we're not doing that. So I have to make the critical decision to get out full time and go to the reserves. So now I'm thrust into being a mum of a child and having to get out of the Defence Force, of something I always wanted to be in, and was such a big part of my life, to trying to be a mum. And that's when the wheels sort of fall off, that I go, I'm not skilled enough at this job. I was really good. I think I was really good at my job in the Army. I was fucking dismal at being a parent. and trying to feed a baby on my own. My husband's deployed, trying to hold down a house, trying to rationalise having to get out of the Defence Force. So, I managed to survive through that deployment, but it must have been, we must have done another, he came back from there and then went to Afghanistan again. And I think when he came back from that one, or while he was on that one, I was at the supermarket and I was pushing the trolley and I literally, don't cry over spilt milk, but dropped a litre of milk on the floor, a 2 litre jug, and it spilt everywhere in the supermarket. And I was like, you know what, this is not for me. The whole thing's not for me, and I would never hurt my child, but the wanting to be checked out was a decision that I decided that this was actually going to be best for me.
And I understand that because you and I have spoken off air, and a lot of the listeners know about my own mental health struggles as well. And I, 11 years ago, was at that point too where I was standing on the edge of a cliff and going, I'm seconds away from ending my life. And are you in that sense of, is it postnatal depression, or is it just?
I think it was a combination of different things. It was, my not amazing childhood, the loss of identity of the Defence Force, having felt like I'd had a career but not actually achieved anything in it. The fact that my husband was overseas, the fact that friends had died. I think it was just a combination of all of it.
Just compounding to and then it was just I'll just check out. I'd lost physical fitness. It was just I just couldn't see that there was any purpose. And at that point, Emma, are you putting your hand up and trying to get help, or is that you still compartmentalising it for later to deal with, or are you?
Look, my whole thing was that I was actually, I was putting the kid in bed at night and then just sobbing and crying and, and I was like, I'm not here as a mum and I don't want to be here as a mum, but I am here as a mum and I have no choice. So it was that sort of bit of me going, oh, fuck, something has to change. And then I decided, I don't know. I was so far down that I went to a doctor and tried to explain it. And he was like, well, look, just take some medication.
It always seems to be I had the same thing. Oh, just take this. And
this will fix it.
It doesn't. No. There's a lot of inner work that you have to do. And for you, and that's why when I spoke up, and I continue to advocate for mental health now, especially for men, women seem to be better at putting their hand up and going, hey, I'm not okay, and I need help. Men, and I'll say this from purely my perspective, that it was hard for me, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do is go, oh, I'm in trouble and I need help. And for you went down that path of not just taking tablets and thinking that will be that solve the issue. You actually did go and speak to psychologists, and did you feel that it was starting to help, or was it still because I know with me it was tick and flick.
Look, I was so pissed off because every time I went to a psychologist and you'd sit down, they go, right, tell me about your childhood. I'm like, I'm already fucking miserable. Do we need to rehash that? Yep. I couldn't understand how going back, what I needed was, and I think it's I don't want to speak for every veteran, but lots of veterans, just give me some fucking skills to get out of where I am now. Yes, maybe it's related to something. Yes, I need to fix it. Maybe I need to go back. What I need now is I need some good skills. I need some solutions. I need a direction, not just a tablet. I need something. Once I've got to here, then let me go back there. I don't want to go back and don't unpack
Give me the tools.
Give me the tools. Let me be functional, and then we can worry about the rest of it.
And it's sort of, I use the analogy of you're putting the rungs on the ladder. You want to get, eventually you'll get to the top, but you got to start from somewhere. And you just give me the tools on how to get out of this. And it's interesting because I had a police veteran on a couple of months ago, and he asked me a question that I couldn't answer, and he said, "Ads, explain to me at your worst what the pain was like. And I said, Mark, I haven't got an answer for you. And he said, it's funny. And then I turned it on to him and I said, well, you tell me what, because he had suicidal ideations as well. And I said, what was it like for you? And he said, mate, I can't explain it. And it's like, and he said, mate, every single person I've ever spoken to with mental health can't explain that pain, that feeling. And probably the same for you, I'm guessing, as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it, you know, it just... There, you know, and it doesn't matter if you've got kids, you've got family, you've got nothing, you know, it is whatever that one switch is that switches for you. So for me at that point, it was the fear of fucking it up. So it wasn't actually the fear of completing it. That wasn't my fear. My fear was, if I fuck this up, I don't want to live in this body of a broken vessel. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so unless I know that the method that I'm going to have is absolutely foolproof and I need this, this and this and this, I'm not skilled at this point to have all that stuff. I need to do. So I was like, well, fuck, I need to come up with something else, which is trying to get better.
Yeah, and that's where the work starts. Like you, and I've since gone on, and now I've gone on and I've actually studied mental health. And like I'm now a mental health first aider. I now work with Beyond Blue, and there's for you and for me and anyone else who suffers. I hate it when people say, "Oh, it's just attention seeking." No, there's a chemical imbalance in your brain that is sending you. And why wouldn't it? And this is what I want to highlight. And you say you don't have a story. Yes, you do, and it's. You're the wife of an SAS veteran who is not here, deployed, and he's doing his job. You're a new mum, and you've just lost your purpose of over 10 years full time at that point that is gone.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you be struggling?
Yeah.
Like, and that's I look at that and I go, you've got every reason to be struggling. Yeah. And are you at this point too, is Mark aware of that you're in the hurt locker?
No, not a chance. He knew I was struggling with motherhood, as in, you know, I was struggling breastfeeding, I was struggling that sort of stuff. But I don't think not until, you know, years like later do we have a discussion about it. But you know, I'm suddenly expected to. And I don't think I'm a hyper-masculine female. I know everyone throws around different alpha females or whatever it is, but I definitely identify with males and hang with males better than I do females. So, you know, at this point, I'm with all these women who are fucking relishing motherhood and their babies sleep through the night, and I'm like, I don't even know if I want this baby. Like, I don't think this is for me. So, you know, I'm like... You know, I said to Mark, we should have babies. This is what we should do for whatever reason. I'm like, so I've made this bed and I need to lie in it. And I'm like, you know, so yeah, I just, there's no way I would let him know. And, you know, that goes back to, I also need him really to focus. I need him to be because if I need him to come home, he needs not to think about me.
Which, I take my hat off to you. Like, that is just, because it's a different mindset because, and I understand now, and this is where it's just come into my head. Do you feel that if you had have not been in the military, do you think that it would have been easier of what was going on? Or like if you hadn't have joined and you didn't, like you'd lost your purpose, do you think it would have been a bit easier, like just being a new mum, husband's away? Do you think that because you're in the military it made it that harder?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I bounce between, you know, I really do bounce between the two about, you know, what it meant was I was a safe space and my husband could tell me anything. He could, you know, when he was here and with me, he could tell me what happened overseas. He could explain situations and I had a knowledge of what he was talking about. So, you know, that bit was easy. The idea that, you know, operational security was really important, that was easy for me to do. You know, I'm not telling my hairdresser that my husband's in Afghanistan, you know, and it enabled us to set up things, so when he was overseas and he would say, I'm going on a muster, I go, okay, so that means he's out for 4 days and I'm not going to hear from him. Or he'd go, I've got to go looking for cattle. I'd go, okay, so that's going to be a 2-week that he's away from communication. So, we adapted because I had the skills, but in the same token, I didn't fit into society and the norm with the rest of the wives and the rest of the group either. So
you're sort of like on your own, essentially.
I probably wasn't, but that's how it felt.
Of course, yeah. So, and if this, like you're going through this period, life is about to change even more, and a day that you. Let me just go through my. Where is it? Here we go. Actually, that's what I was going to ask you. Is so you guys are living this kinetic lifestyle. It's not normal for you. Is when Mark's away, as you say, the communication is here, there, and when you can. When he comes back, and how is that being that? Is he because he's in the SAS? Is it being a new dad? How did he take to being like? And how was that home life when he came home?
Yeah, so I think the biggest, people always go, they deploy for 6 months. I think the missing piece of that is they deploy 2 to 3 weeks before they deploy. They're already mindset. They're already worrying about whether they've got the right kit, whether they've got the... So while you're desperately trying to connect as a couple and going, let's spend every living minute together, they're already gone. So it's, that funny dynamic. And then when they come back... how I'm expecting him to fit into my life and to have missed me and to have been a part of us and want to be a part of us. But he's just spent 6 months fighting for his life and in a completely different mindset. And I'm like, so we come back, he's got to... now he left and, if I take just the first deployment, I mean, if you look at it and you said 7 deployments, so by the time... Kaylee was born in the October 2006. By the time he stopped deploying in 2016, I think it was his last deployment. In that time, he was away for 6 months every year of that child's life. So we worked it out for 5 years. So 5 years, he wasn't a part of a child's life that was his child. So I think it was a really messy dynamic in the family. So, Kaylee and I were used to being just together. Suddenly there's this person that she has to share her time with. So, how do they connect? And they struggle connecting. How do I fit him back into the, he left a baby that wasn't rolling and now has come back to a baby that rolls, or left a baby who wasn't talking, who's now talking and doing, he's missed birthdays, he's missed, book parades, whatever those are, So at the time, I thought it was a really clever idea. I came up with giving him a regime on the fridge of this is when we eat, this is what we do, this is our thing. I thought that would be really nice. Turns out it wasn't great. But, it was that trying to, I went into this mad, making sure the gutters were clean, the house was clean, the lawns were, so he could just fit in. But it took ages for him to fit back in. And then, I guess that's the big part that I get frustrated with society is not understanding what 7 deployments was like. Like, he needs to come back in. And it's not that he just then has 6 months. It's not fucking FIFO. It's not just 6 months at home. It's 6 months of training, or they've gone on to CT rotation or team or whatever that is. So that they're not home that whole time. And you're still trying to fit them into a house and trying to connect with them and, trying to find your own life in there. And, if you've got a job, trying to take time off to spend time with it. Like, it's just a nightmare.
Of course. And, it's... I know, and I'll refer back to Moff. Moff says it in his podcast with me that his greatest sacrifice was his family and the time away that... And he said... It's only now that and because I've been speaking to him because he's about to come back on again, is that he's only just got to a point with his son now that he's at a good point where they're actually, the bond is, it's there again. And same thing for Mark with both the kids. And it's, and this is the thing that I highlight to the non-military listeners, that this is the thing. Mark was one day in a gunfight, and the next day he's sitting with you at the kitchen table or at the dining room eating dinner, and 48 hours later, 48 hours earlier, he was in a contact. And this is the thing where the First World War veterans and the Second World War and Vietnam as well, they got to decompress. As the modern day, and especially the SF guys, they didn't have that luxury. There's no decompression. It's, okay, bang, you're home, cool, see the fam, bye, off again. And this is the repeat, 7 deployments, 8 deployments, 9 deployments with the regiment, and it's not normal. So normal life, I can understand why you're thinking, oh, shit, then was there ever people think, oh, geez, where's Emma's husband? Where is he? Was there ever that? Was there ever that? And no,
I think, the bit I think I really struggled with was, I've got a mum and dad that we have a tumultuous relationship at best, but I grew up with maybe once a month I ring my mum. That's it. And so we don't speak every day. And then Mark's, I've met this man, and now I've got his family who are ringing me every day for updates. So I'm now trying to navigate what it's like to have an extended family, and I don't have a clue with no information I can share. I legitimately can't share information. I feel blessed that we lived in a patch. We didn't always live in a patch, mind you, but once I was in a patch, Kaylee was at a school with other defence kids, so we could tell them they were deployed. That was it. The school didn't ask, the school didn't push, the school didn't, and I think not everybody was blessed in that sort of position. And there's questions why your dad's not at Father's Day or your dad's not at this sort of thing. And, I think it's really hard. I can't tell her what he's doing because I can't have her tell them. So, now I'm already keeping secrets from her. She wants to know where dad is, dad's away, what's dad doing? There's 1,001 questions kids ask.
And it's a major burden on both you and Kaylee. You've got, and this is what I love to highlight in the podcast is that, if your family goes on the journey with you, if you join up, it's not just, oh, okay, I've joined and my family's back. They go on it with you, and it's not a normal life, and it's a massive burden to carry. And when Mark was away, and you and Kaylee are back here, and he's away on deployment, was there ways that you implemented to keep keep Mark involved in Kaylee's life?
So I think this has been my ongoing sort of rhetoric that I learnt. That skill was that maintaining connection when there's disconnection. I think that's the biggest thing. If you as a couple can try and do that, I think can really, really assist. So we used to, I'd buy Kaylee a few new books, and then before Mark, though he fucking hated him and would do it with her, he didn't hate the fact he was doing it. It was taking time out of what he needed to do to get ready. But he would sit down and he would read the books and we would record it on the computer. So while he was away, Kaylee would get a new book. She could get a Snuggie Bunny and a bottle of milk, and she would sit and watch and read a book with Dad. And then we had a daddy-daughter book, so every time he deployed, whatever the photos we were able to maintain in that 4 months while he was home, we'd get as many photos of them together and we'd put it in an album so that they could flick through and she could remember the moments that Daddy was part of that sort of thing.
That's really forward thinking of you. It's, to do that sort of thing, to keep her engaged, that Daddy, because as you say, she's little. Who's this figure that's coming in and out of my life and Mum's life and coming back? That's really forward thinking by you to go, actually, well, this is how we can. So, and do you, obviously now hindsight's a wonderful thing. Mark's now out, and do the kids the bond is now it's there now, it's got better? Or
it's really different between the two kids. So Hamish had I think did 2 deployments or lived through 2 deployments, whereas Kaylee lived through all of them, including the little tiny one. So I guess technically there was 9 times that he was away on an operational thing. But they have a really a really disjointed relationship. It's finally getting better now, but that's now she's 19, almost 19. So it has taken a lot, you know, and hindsight really is a good thing because, you know, looking back, Mark and I couldn't have done it any other way than the way we did it, and we survived it. But when I actually look back at it, I go, I hadn't realised that I had made him feel not valued or wanted. So all those moments that I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping things away from him, by compartmentalising, by not letting him know what was going on at home, by making sure the gardens were done well, making sure I made it inconsequential. He didn't think he was needed to be part of our lives. So, you know, he's coming back in and going, actually, they don't even need me in this relationship. They're perfectly fine on their own. And I'm like, you know, and it was only when we went to marriage counselling a little while ago that he was like, I was like, mate, it was not fun for me. Like, he knew it wasn't fun, but, like, the fact that I didn't cope, he didn't realise that I wasn't, you know, that I was crying, that I was really, you know, not doing amazing.
Well, you did such a good job to compartmentalise it for so long. Eventually, those damn walls, it breaks. Like, you can't, there's only so much, and you know it now for the work you've done. You can only compartmentalise something for so long before you have to, or before it's, and it could be the most smallest trigger that then just the flood, then it just flood. There's a floodgate, and to put on top of that, not just that you're the wife of a special forces soldier. Then we throw into the mix that your lives changed on the 2nd of September 2008, and you throw in a Victoria Cross. And I don't just say that. I'm not just going, throw in a Victoria Cross. And I'll read this out, and as you say, this is where your lives change. And essentially, well, the private life doesn't really stay private anymore. It now becomes public. And so I'll read this, and then I'll get your thoughts, because you have two views on this, and I'm really interested to talk about both views. So I'll read this out, and for the listener. So on the 2nd of December 2008, of his own volition and displaying complete disregard for his own safety, Corporal Donaldson moved alone on foot across approximately 80 metres of exposed ground to recover a wounded interpreter. His movement, once identified by the enemy, drew intense and accurate machine gun fire from entrenched positions. Upon reaching the wounded coalition force interpreter, Corporal Donaldson picked up and carried him back to relative safety of the vehicles, then provided immediate first aid before returning to the fight. I've summarised his citation because it was a big citation. I've had Troy Simmons on the podcast, and this was the contact that Mark was awarded his Victoria, and Troy's story in itself is crazy how he didn't get killed and all the rest of the guys got killed that day. You hear that citation. You're the wife of Mark. You're a mum. How are you told that he is going to be awarded the highest award for bravery? And you're obviously proud of him, but there's two parts of this, and I'll let you tell both parts.
Yeah. So I think the biggest, going all the way back to the 2nd of September. So he's busy doing this. I'm at the gym. So I dropped the Kaylee off at creche, and I'm at the gym, and there's a news article, and it goes, Australian soldiers in the biggest battle since Vietnam, wounded, yada yada. It's just a huge big news feed. And I'm sitting there going, I know he's out chasing cows, because we had a discussion 4 days ago, and I'm like, which obviously means he's out doing stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, is this his group or not his group? I don't know. I'm like, so, and I am at the gym and panicking, because I'm pretty sure there's just this gut, this nagging. I'd said to him before he'd gone on this deployment, legitimately, I said to him, if you die doing something fucking stupid, I will never forgive you. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh God, I just knew. But, You know, I hadn't had any phone calls. No one had rung me. If it was on the news, then he's not injured. But I'm like, okay, so I finish my workout, I go home. Later on that day, he rings me and I'm like, hey, how are you? He goes, you're going to be angry. And I'm like, right. He goes, I did something stupid, but I'll tell you about it later. And I'm like, okay. Are you okay? He goes, I'm okay. I said, is everyone okay? He goes, mostly okay. And I was like, right. He goes, anyway, I got to go. And then that's it. So he continues on deployment. So, you know, other people know about this citation later on, but I know nothing. By the time, you know, I'm not in the unit anymore, but, you know, a couple of days later I find out a bit more details about the guys and the injuries, not about the rest of it. And then he doesn't come back until November. So by the time November comes, it's a blip for us in our relationship. I'm like, you know, we'd decided, you know, he'd had a bit of a rocky trip and he had said we should get married. So we decided we'd get married. So we're planning our wedding for December and we're doing all this. So we get married in December. So now at work there's rumours. There's rumours that the 2IC that I mentioned earlier that I was mates with in Townsville was either going to charge him or he was possibly going to get awarded for the shit that he did on the day. So, but it was not really the discussion of a Victoria Cross. It was maybe an MG, something like that. So anyway, that was a thing. We got married, had a wedding. We were planning on going on our honeymoon in January. And I think January, he gets a phone call and it's from the CO at the time. And the CO is like, you need to come and we need to have a discussion. And Mark's like, oh, okay. He goes, and you need to bring your wife. And Mark's like, well, I think I'm getting sacked. I'm like, I don't think you're getting sacked. Anyway, he goes, we'll meet you at the Blue Duck Cafe, which is a cafe at Cottesloe. We walk down to the cafe. Cafe is empty, like absolutely empty, apart from, and it's like a normal day, so it shouldn't be empty. It's empty. There's a couple of waitresses and there's the Chief of the Army and the CO. And we're like, fuck. Okay. And at that point, it's, you know, because the Victoria Cross is one of the only medals that you accept or you can say no to. So the other ones you're awarded. This one you actually get the opportunity. And the reason is because, you know, you're suddenly going to be a public figure. So Mark and I had that discussion with the Chief of the Army. And to be fair, Mark drove the discussion because it was, am I still going to be able to serve? Even though my face is out there, can I still have my career? So we're promised then and there that he can still have his career if he accepts this award. And we're like, righto, okay. So anyway, we'd obviously decided that he would accept the award, and then we went across the road to the Cottesloe pub and had a beer. We were giggling because we'd get to meet the Queen. So this is, at this point, this is all we know. And then we're going on our honeymoon and, you know, they said we can do it anytime you want, this is fine. Turns out you can't. They were panicking someone was going to let it slip and they needed a good news story. So, and we couldn't, and I think this is the funny part that, well, I find it funny, no one else might, but at this point they've decided that they're going to do the investiture and it's going to be in Canberra, but no one's allowed to know about it. So Mark and I, they tee it up so it's around our honeymoon, so we were supposed to be leaving. So we've lied to literally every friend and family member we have that we're still going on the honeymoon. We've told Kaylee we're still going to New Zealand. She's 2.5 at this point, because if we'd told her anything else, she was... So anyway, we've... You know, and I've not told my mum. So anyway, we fly to Canberra. We land in Canberra and Kaylee's like, yay, New Zealand. We're like, yep, this is New Zealand. Yep. This is it. So, and then we go into a week of, you know, of discussions of how the investiture, and, you know, we had a David Mulhall and a whole heap of other chiefs and Defence Force members were in a room and they were talking about the day, and we're just sitting there and I've got Kaylee. Mark's trying desperately to let me be a part of the discussion and we're there. So we're discussing the day. We're discussing how it's going to be announced, all that sort of stuff. But, you know, and then Kaylee's sitting in this meeting and she turns around and goes, make the boring men stop talking. Like, oh God, so I died 1,000 deaths. Anyway, but at this point I'm bouncing between... The soldier in me wants to follow the directions that they're telling us. the wife and the mother in me, like they're making us, Kaylee and I have to go to media stuff, we have to wear certain clothes, we need to be, and I'm like, okay, defence is telling me I have to do it, but the mother in me is like, I don't want to be a part of that, I don't want to be, anyway, but to cut a long story, I made a short story really long.
No, it's great.
The first time I hear about the battle is actually sitting in that room while Mark is getting it read out and invested. Like, I had no fucking idea. Yeah.
And that, you're proud of him, but as you said, you did, like, you don't do something stupid because I'll be angry. And you're immensely proud of your husband, but are you thinking as well, and I mean this in the utmost respect to Mark, which you're thinking, like, hey mate, like, that's fucked. Like, you could, if any one of those rounds you might not be here, and I might be, and we'll get into the work you do with legacy later. Yeah. You might be a legacy, a legacy widow. Is that going through your head at that point?
So I think at that point I was just on the ride with the rest of Australia in the sort of, the wash up of that week and that month. I think it was soon after that, though, that, Mark was still at the regiment. He was still allowed to deploy. He was still doing that. But Army had all these other expectations that he would attend these things every time a dignitary came into town. So I'd find myself in these events, and I'm there with all these people, and it was then where it started really wobbling for me, is everyone's going, oh my God, he's so amazing, he's such a hero. And I was stuck with the thought that, he actually didn't give a shit about Kaylee and I. He did not. There was no point in his life to save a random interpreter that he doesn't even... If it had been one of the boys, wouldn't have given a shit. Like, I would have hats off understood it. It was the fact that it was a random. It was a random to me, not a random to him. But it was a random to me that he risked his life to save. And, trying to juggle that with, this hero that Australia had painted with a man that I had known who was now also becoming a man that I didn't know. So, he went from being a man who would never iron a T-shirt to wearing, slacks and shirts and, having media presence and being able to speak and do. And I'm like, well, where's the Mark that I knew? And, and selfishly as well in that, I think there was a loss of me. So I'd lost me from defence. I'd had this new identity as a mother. I'd, all of that sort of stuff. And then really selfishly, suddenly I was literally on every piece of paper, Mrs. Mark Donalson VC. So they'd even taken away my own name. And, I was like, was really resentful of the whole situation.
Well, essentially too, like, as you said, earlier on in the podcast, you've said that you lost your career because, postings, and you're now becoming a mum, Mark's in the SAS, and I get it. I understand it. Like, I get that, yes, you're proud of him, but also it's now Mark is owned by the public. Like, it's no longer M. Kaylee and Mark. It is M. Kaylee, Mark, and the rest of Australia and the world. Yeah. And I can understand why you would feel that, well, hang on, he's a hero, but he's also he's Mark. He's not, yes, that action doesn't define who he is. That's one moment in his life, doesn't define who he is. So I get it. And did you wrestle with that for a while? Was that...
Yeah, and to be fair, I wasn't the only one wrestling with it. I think, Mark and I have had many conversations that, if we had gone back in time and we were sitting in that blue duck, our answer would be no. That and don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound like I'm not thankful for the blessings that have come, and I've met some amazing people, and I know it is all down to my husband and this award. I know that, where we are in life now is down to that, but would we give it all up just to be Mark and Emma and, to have, whatever that life was? Yeah, probably.
And it's quite interesting you say that, because I've just had Keith Payne VC on, and he said it himself. He said there is a weight in this that people, and there is there's an expectation that you will do things, and you and I have had that discussion, and it doesn't, like, I think people forget that it is an award that is, and it means nothing until the name is inscribed in the back of it. It's just a little, it's a medal, but as soon as it's flipped over and that name is inscribed, that's it forever. It then becomes that it's the story behind the Victoria. And I've been blessed to speak to a number of Victoria Cross recipients, and they all say the same thing, that they're proud to wear it, but if they had their time over again, they would probably say the same thing and no. And it's such a, and it's not cheapening the medal by saying that, but it is. It's such a burden, and you've had to carry that burden along with Mark, and the kids have as well, because, like, the kids, like, as we said earlier, like, did the kids know what Dad had done?
Yeah, Kaylee didn't really, but, you know, she knew that Daddy got to be on TV, and, you know, so there was that new persona of him. And so she got to do that. Hamish was so much littler that I think I've got a photo of him when he was like 18 months, super stoked that Dad was on Sports. I was going to say Illustrated, but I don't know if that was it. I can't picture him in a bikini on Sports Illustrated, but maybe it was that one. But, you know, so Hamish had that, but then Hamish, you know, by the time we came here, Mark had a different posting and wasn't part of the regiment, so was home far more. So, you know, it was, I'd sort of touched on it when Hamo popped into the kitchen before, but he was at school and they were having a discussion about Anzac Day, and one of his teachers said to him, well, your dad's very amazing, isn't he? He won a really big award. And Hamish is like, and he goes, no, he won a Victoria Cross. Hamish came home and was like, Dad, did you win a Victoria Cross or something? So we were like, how has he missed that? Like, one has all the knowledge in the world and the other child, zero. Zero. Yeah,
and that's, as you say, sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, and yeah, your dad is a mate. Like, he's got there's no other award that, you know, and what people need to, like, and our non-military listeners, is forevermore, Mark will be Mark Donalson VC. That the VC is, it doesn't matter if he goes on and does an honours degree or becomes a doctor, or it's the VC is forever and etched next to his name, and it's so, yeah, like, it is special. But as you say, and for you, and I know how, you know, you are very private, and I understand that, and for you, your loss, like, you now, your life's changed forever. How does it affect you going forward with your career, Em, like, after Mark has been awarded the Victoria Cross?
Yeah, so, you know, by this time, you know, I've just given up defence altogether. You know, I've done a couple of reserve days, but it really is pointless. I got my very first day rocking up, I parked the car on the parade ground at the reserve unit, and I got out of the car and I put my sunnies on my head, and I got absolutely reamed by this RS. I'm like, mate, and it was this whole rash. I'm like, are you serious? Like, do you actually know what matters in life? Because it's not my sunnies on my head. And I said to Mark, I don't think I can do real army. I don't think I can do big army. I don't think it's for me. So, you know, I get out of that. But, you know, we had a little cute house in Freo, a little tiny cottage. So we weren't living in the married patch at this point. But Mark deployed to Afghanistan, and we had randoms, like literally randoms, knocking on the doorstep. And, you know, and rightly or wrongly, we had an old man, I think we did it to ourselves. We had an old man was walking down the street. He had a heart attack. So we rendered first aid. Mm-hmm. But the paramedics had recognised who Mark was. So then it was in the paper. So then our house was in the paper. So suddenly we're, you know, so at that point the regiment was like, you know, because DHA have this thing, you can't own a house in the same state and have a married quarter, and our house was suitable. So anyway, we managed to get a special exemption, and we were allowed to move into the married patch and then maintain our house. We just couldn't make profit on it. So we had our house. I moved my dad in. He got drunk and burnt it down. Anyway, that's another long story. Well, Mark was in Afghanistan and I was pregnant with Hamish, and it was my birthday. So it was good.
Oh,
it was
wow.
great.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Okay, so it all now is starting to, with, as you mentioned, with your childhood and everything, like, wow, just crazy. Like, and you said to me before we start, it's not really a story. Are you joking? This is wow, like wild. And so, and for you, like as you say, like you're trying to balance. And like Mark was the first, like he was the first, and wouldn't be the last, but he's the first Victoria Cross recipient in 40 years. So it's a big deal. Like it's massive, and and thank God that there was other Victoria Crosses awarded, so that the burden wasn't just with Mark going forward, and for a long time what it was for Keith. It's thank God there was others, and we won't get into that story. That's another story, and poor bugger, but we'll leave that one alone. But what was it like? And as you said, Mark is awarded the Victoria Cross, and we're going to get off Mark shortly in a minute because it's about you, but it's part of the story. Yeah. When Mark was awarded the Victoria Cross, the opportunity is there to meet the Queen, and what was that like for you, getting to meet the late Queen? And because she just seemed like a beautiful person. Is that your recollection of when you got to meet her? Yeah, she's,
and to be fair, we were blessed to meet her on a number of different occasions. And, I sort of, the very first time we sort of met her was in the palace, and she told a really funny story about, and it was, one of those things that you just pinch yourself and you just go, so she was talking about how an officer from the Canadian Army came to brief her on her army. And I was just the concept, like, that is technically her army. Like, it's Canadian, but it's just that, she just said it so casually. But anyway, he had asked her, stupidly, I think, anyway, he had asked her why she'd built her castle so close to the airport.
Like she built that castle.
Windsor Castle was around prior to aeroplanes, buddy. But anyway, so she would tell little funny anecdotes and little stories like that. But then we went to Westminster Abbey, and she was there for, I can't remember what it was, maybe a Remembrance Day service. But she came in and she had her crown and she had her staff and she had her, and you could. And it's probably going to sound naffy, but you could feel the weight of history and what royal meant. Just what, like, and to have, I just can't understand. We had a saying, but when we said before that the Victoria Cross was a burden, I can't imagine what the burden of royalty is like. But to have that dichotomy of who she is in those sort of events, and to be fair, we've met a number of the royals now, and we met Charles again as the king when we went over this time, and we were privileged enough to take Hamish, and Hamish had a chance to meet the king, and the king took his time out of his day to really ask and engage with my son questions about his school, so that dedication of duty, and they really are just really no, they're not humble, that's not quite the right word, but they really are there in the moment with you. It's not just a part of
it's
their
not
job.
all just show. Is it for you a pinch yourself moment thinking you're English born, that you would see that you would end up at Westminster Abbey and at Windsor Castle going, oh, when I was a kid, did you ever foresee that?
Yeah, when we were joking in the pub after we'd found out and we were like, we get to meet the Queen, I was just like, so when we got to see her at another private function, and I was in such, I was like, oh my God, I just, I'm like, just remember to curtsy. I was just so excited about the whole
Of course,
thing.
who wouldn't be? And And it's even more special for you because you were born in England.
Yeah.
Like that's so. And anyone that gets like I've been privileged enough to meet Prince Edward. So and because he was out here with Duke of Edinburgh, so he was representing, and I got to meet him and shake his hand, and it was like, oh my god, I've met royalty. Like it's, and you become a fan. It's like a fanfare. You're like,
absolutely.
you know, and of course, so, and that, as you say, you never would have foreseen as a little girl. Oh, one day I'll go to both Windsor Castle and I'll meet these. You know, as you said, you know, through the Victoria Cross, you've met some amazing people. Never would have foreseen that when you were a little girl. And I want to talk. And I'm going to bring in the wives and the partners, which we've touched on. But for you, in 2012, the 2nd of July is a tough day for you and Mark. With the loss of Blaine Diddams, MG, you knew Blaine very well, and you know TA and Sian and then the Diddams very well. But it's also it's a double loss this day because Mark loses his best friend, his dog Devil, in the same battle. For you, Em, what do you remember of this day?
So it must have been about 2 a.m. in the morning. The phone rings, and it's never good when the phone's ringing at that time. It's a private number, so I'm pretty sure it's Mark, and I pick it up, and Mark sounds shaken. And the frustrating thing for me was I wasn't expecting a phone call because they were flying out the next day. So it was literally the day they, you know, so I was like, they've done nothing, they're doing nothing for the next few days, and then they'll be home, well, apart from deservicing and doing all that sort of stuff. And, you know, he phones, and I'm like, hey. He's like, hey. I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I don't know. And he just kept saying it, and I was like, I had never heard him that shaken up. And I was like, okay, cool, all right, I need to be strong. Whatever this is, I need to be strong. And I'm like, you know, what's happened? And he was like, you know, Devil's just been killed. And I was like, okay. And he was really devastated. And I think, you know, I was like, okay. And, you know, I'd met Devil. I understood what Devil meant to him, but Devil didn't mean as much to me. So, you know, at that point it was okay. I was like, okay, cool, all right, I'm here for him. And then he goes, and Dids is dead. But he just said it so casually. And I just remember being floored, and just my heart broke. It broke for TA, it broke for Dids, it broke for the boys. I didn't know what to do. And then I was like, okay. He goes, I've got to go. He goes, just go back to sleep. And then he hung up, and I'm like lying there going, how do you go back to sleep? And just knowing what TA was going through, because I wouldn't have had that conversation had she not already known. So, you know, I know Mark's phoned me, and I know she knows, and my heart is just breaking for her. It's breaking for the larrikin that we'll never see again, and not knowing what that was. And then, you know, are they going to be able to get, you know, my head's just gone a million miles an hour now. Are the boys going to be able to come home with him? Are they still coming home? Are they, what's that going to be like? You know, when do I go out and see TA? And it's 2 a.m, and who the fuck am I going to talk to? And thankfully, you know, this goes back to being in the patch. And, you know, I put on we've got a little WhatsApp group, and I just put on there, anyone up? Like, that's it. Because I knew those who would know would be up, you know. And then, you know, one of my amazing friends, Kaz, she's like, I'm up. And so, you know, we get to have a conversation about it. But I'm like, you know, what do you do? And then I'm like, okay, we want to go around and see TA. What's that look like? And I'm like, you know, and I had to laugh because we're all of us, I don't know what you say to someone when they've lost the love of their life, and I don't know what you... So we all just turned up with cartons of cigarette and alcohol. We're like, we'll just drink and smoke our way through these feelings until we work out what, you know. And I don't, you know, and yeah, and those, like, I just remember those first few days of those conversations of, you know, how you rationalise that, you know. And kind of blessing, I guess, is that the boys were coming back. So it wasn't like they had to continue. So, we were able to have, go to Didzard's run at their farm and have a, knees up memory where people just sat around and told all the, stories of Dids and be with his family and be with the kids and be with TA and,
He was, and you nearly made me cry, and I have a tendency to do this on the podcast, and I don't like getting my guests to cry. And it's not a good thing, trust me. And sitting across from you, and Em, thank you for sharing that, because it's never easy, and I know it too that Siana's become a really, really close friend of mine and someone that I value a lot, and it's like you've got a double loss. Like you've known Dids a long, long time. TA says it in the documentary that she went into depression and was very hard to, and that bond, and I'm going to bring it back in a sec, but the bond of the wives and the partners, that's where it has to be strong, isn't it? Like, and that unbreakable to, as you say, a shit situation that literally they were hours away from flying out, and Mark loses Devil, and when he gets home, he's grieving the loss of his mate, but he's also grieving the loss of Devil. Does he go into that, what happened in the loss with Devil and the loss of Dids?
I think, he bounced between two different ones, because I think there was a lot of guilt in and around Devil, because he had been Devil's handler but wasn't Devil's handler on this trip. So, there was that wishing that he had been with Devil when Devil had passed. And then, there was the anger and, why were we on that trip? Should we have gone out on that gig? Should we, and now I've lost a mate, and now, so there's that whole sort of, gamut, and watching him bounce between that and then trying to fit into, and I don't want to try and bring it back to us, but it was, we're still us in this whole relationship.
Of course.
He's now come back to a 6-month-old baby that he's not known either. So now he's trying to rationalise being a dad with a 6-month-old and a 5.5-year-old and a loss of a friend and a loss of, it was a lot.
Yeah, and is it, at this point, how are you guys going? Like, marriage-wise, are you trying to be strong for Mark, but also you guys are like trying to work out and the dynamics of home away. How are you guys at that point?
Yeah, I think that naively I'd seen so many relationships, and there's always a toss around that. If the army had wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. And there's that mentality out there. But I'd always said to him, I knew what it was like to be a soldier, and I would never ask you to leave, and I would never ask you to stop doing what you love. And then I was the woman who asked him to stop doing what he loved. And to be fair, I didn't, to be fair to myself, I did give him an ultimatum, and the ultimatum wasn't that he needed to leave the regiment. The ultimatum was he gives up the Victoria Cross or the regiment, but he can't have both. So, that was, we weren't doing well. I didn't want to go to any events. I was sick of trying to play a part in a character that wasn't me. I swear I don't, I drink.
That's what I love about you. It's so good. I love it.
I'm not the picture poster wife they want. Officers, I don't know if you know this, but some of the officers, once you get up the rank, you go to wife school, and you get a special lesson. I go, maybe they should have fucking sent me there because I was not I wasn't the wife.
Yeah.
And we went on to have other ones who had much better wives in those sort of scenarios than me and could play those sort of parts, and I couldn't. And I said to him, I'm done. You choose one. And, I think it was probably, in hindsight now, I know it was the nastiest decision I've ever made him choose, because there was the job that he loved and there was the job that he thought would financially set up the family. So at that point, he chose to follow the opportunities that the Victoria Cross had given him. And, you know, he thought that would set us up better financially. And, you know, we thought, you know, it would potentially change our lives. And it has. And we're not, we sound resentful for it. It has given us the opportunity, but it took us away from friends. It took us away from the family that we had chosen and put us in a position where, you know, we'd lost that sort of connection.
Of course, yeah. And that's why I asked that question, because there's a lot to unpack there. That, you know, and at that point too, that, you know, and I'll just go back to that incident. Blaine was posthumously awarded his MG for his actions, and his last words were, "on me." And so you're there for TA, and this is where the wives and the partners come in. The regiment's lost an icon, and he was an icon. And even at one RAO, everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew who Dids was. And Mark comes back. And, you know, this is where, as you say, we are starting to lose not just Special Forces guys, we are losing regular Army guys. This 2010, 11, 12, 13, a popular opinion of the war in Afghanistan back here at home is not favourable. We've done enough. We're losing too many. It's time to bring them home. What the hell? We're achieving nothing. But the guys are still doing their job, and you have Dids' funeral. That would have been because you're there to support TA, but Mark's still got a job. So that was a real hard period of your life too, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, that the other hard part of that too is, you know, being blessed enough that my husband shares with me, but knowing that they're under-supported, that they're you know, they haven't got enough choppers to do the jobs that they need to do. They are not supported by the infantry in the way that they should have been. They are out on, you know, and I can't imagine the frustration being a soldier who goes overseas. You achieve so much in the 4 months that you're there, to only go back a year later and all the ground that you had made had been lost. And, you know, to feel unsupported by the government in that role, and then the job that you're doing, and then on top of that be unsupported by society, and for society not to actually try and unpack what it's like. What can you, like, to put yourselves in that shoes, in that back-to-back deployment, in the you know, the tempo that they were, and who's responsible for that? You know, that somebody should be responsible for that. The families that broke down, for the children who had lost their parents who had actually died, to the marriages that had broken down. Like, there was so much in that, and the guys were just doing their job and doing a bloody good job at their job. And
to highlight too, as well, that the guys that would take their lives when they got back from the way that they were treated by the public, and as we said off air before we started, Vietnam 2.0.
Yeah.
And they were sent to do a job. No, it's not like they wanted to go, and that was their job. That was what they were told to do. And as you said, and Weeksy explained it so well in his podcast. Go back and listen to Wayne Weeks, RSM of SASR. Fantastic. I learnt more, as I said to you off air, in that 3.5 hours about the whole war in Afghanistan. So the public who listen to this, if you want to hear what actually was happening on the ground and the challenges, and as you said as well, these operations, midway through, the operating procedures were changed. The daylight raids, going away from nighttime raids, which takes away our element of surprise, and we own the night. That's taken away I think it was 2011 we start going, and that wasn't just, here's a shit sandwich, guys, but for the greater good of, you know, for hearts and minds, and I'm using in quoted hearts and minds here, the boys just sucked that up and did it. Yeah. They didn't just, it wasn't just, this is, and, you know, Weeksy says it so well, where Angus Campbell says, and I will use his name here, Angus Campbell says, I can't see that there's going to be a heightened risk to guys' lives. What rock is he living under? Yeah. That, you know, and so many guys paid the ultimate sacrifice because of the hearts and minds mission of, it's good for the Afghan people, and the US the Brits said, no, we're going to... And they upped their rating in the night. This is what people don't understand. Yeah. This is, the challenges that, as you said, you go into a valley that was cleared out 6 months, 12 months before, and then, come back and, we're fighting back in the same valley again. That, it's... This is why podcasts are so great, because they actually tell the people that aren't military enthusiasts or what was actually going on, and the dangers that Mark and all the other guys were facing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and the lack of support for them, and the lack of support for families, and you move on from that. Now we've had a report that's found war crimes and et cetera, and there's no burden of proof. There's no checking what the media is saying. There's no going back on that. And so, you don't look at the number of letters that have had, no longer involved in the investigation, nothing to see here. But look at the family and the life that you just fucking destroyed with your one brushstroke that you've put against everyone. Mm-hmm. And I go, I sit there in that frustration of going, where is your context to this? Do you, look at it that there is not one guy that I know that joined and went, all I want to do is kill people. That's not their mindset. They want to do a job, and they're good at their job, and they achieve their job. They are trained to do that job, and they don't just go, hey, what are you doing? Hey, Adam, do you want to go out and we'll just kill somebody? That's not how it, they don't act without having a fucking order. They don't.
They don't just make shit up. Yeah,
they don't just make shit up.
They just, they don't make shit up. It's there's orders. And as I say, go back and listen to Wayne's podcast, because he says there was no mission profile for us. It was literally push the bubble out. That's it. So, and we as the Special Forces pushed the bubble out to allow the MTF and the RTF to do their work and render it safe and make it safe to do their job. There was it was literally... So they went, well, what is the mission? Yeah. The mission is to, as you say, and I like the thing that you used, is I've got to go and round up some cows, and that's what. And I did it, and I sat across from Weeksy and said the kill capture, which the media grabbed that hashtag line and went, that they were, and Weeksy goes, yeah, they were. We were. That was our mission. It was a mission profile. We found these guys that were leaders, and we were targeting. And he said we called it kill capture, because it was either kill them or capture them. And he said that, and he says it really well. We would get these guys in, and Mark would tell you as well. We would get them in. We'd put them in this, and it took 11 years to set a detention centre up. We would keep them for a little bit and then give them $50 and send them on their way again, and could go. And he's like, and he showed me a plaque in his office, and he had the kill capture thing in his deployments, and he said, "Yep, captured, return, captured, return, captured, return, captured, return." And it's right down and you're just sitting there going, like, no wonder Afghanistan ended the way that it ended. And it was never, as Wayne said as well, it was never going to end the way that there was no strategy, there was no exit. It was just, and now look at it, Taliban rule it now, and it's worse than ever. And they played the best game. They played the waiting game and just went, oh well, we know that eventually you're gonna leave, and now look at the place. So, and that's the thing that we'll get. And now it's about you. Now it's not Mark. Mark's had enough of this. It's now Em's. This is now Em's. And as I say, and what Mark has done, and all the guys, we as Australians are proud, and all of you guys of what, and that's why I wanted to get you on to talk about. It's the other side that's not spoken of, the wives and the partners, and what it does back here at home. You're the very first wife and partner I've ever had on, and it's a privilege to sit across from you and highlight your own story, but also what goes on in the wider army and is felt. And I think too, as you say as well, it's different because SF is a bit different to the wider army. The wider army, they usually do, or they sometimes were lucky if they did get 2 deployments, or as SF, it was, as you said, 7 deployments, but 9 in total.
Yeah.
It's not normal, Em. Yeah. It's not normal. So, and for you, we'll get off that now. I've gone down a rabbit hole, and I'll pull it back. I'll pull it back. But for you, you briefly mentioned that, the transition for you, but eventually you finally transitioned altogether out of both being a reservist and a full-time. Did you find it, once you'd separated totally and severed that final defence umbilical cord, is that when things got hard again, or was it just that sort of, I've transitioned from full-time, this part-time now? Talk me through that.
I think for me, the biggest part that I've always struggled with the transition piece is the identifying myself as a female and as a veteran, and I really just don't fit into the typical mould of a female, and wider society and how females are and act, and what they're supposed to do. The bits that I'm missing out of my service career at this point, the mateship, the black humour, the shooting, the guns. I haven't found female friends that have I can just slot back into and have that sort of thing. So I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do? I've got some RPL that pretty much gives me a certificate in a call centre, and I'm like, but that's not the role for me. So where do I find a role? Where do I find purpose? Where do I find a job? I tried personal training for a little bit, but that's one of those things. I studied it because I wanted to know more about it for me. And then after that, I went on and, funnily enough, and I don't know if this is where you wanted to go with that question, but, my neighbour next door, who's lovely, hats off, came to me and said, look, I found a job in the newspaper. And I'm like, okay, because I'd been working at the high school canteen in a paid position, which was good fun, but didn't pay amazingly, but was, good fun. And I've had a look at this job, and it goes, open arms. We need people with lived experience of mental health journey and as a veteran. I'm like, seriously, somebody's going to employ me for my head noise? I'm like, I don't know if that's really a job. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so it was a peer and community open arms advisor, and I was like, okay, so I had a look into the role, and I'm sure you've probably had her name mentioned, but Bree Till.
Yes.
So Brett Till's wife.
Yep.
She had worked at Open Arms, and, through the network of people, I gave Bree a phone call and said, I don't actually understand what a peer worker is. Can you sort of talk me through it? And so she had this discussion, and I was like, do you know what? That's like a sense of purpose and service. I will be, and I'm like, they're the bits currently that I'm missing from defence life that I think I could slot into.
Well, and this is it. You've segued that beautifully, because it's now, this is where for you we're going to get into the current day of what you do, and you've really found your true passion now is supporting current serving and ex-serving veterans and their families. And in your opinion, what more needs to be done for veteran families?
I think the biggest, and you just said the most beautiful term that I wish people would start using, Adam, is veteran families. Because it's veterans and families is what everyone's using. But veteran family, I think, is, it ties it directly to. And I think there needs to be far more knowledge of what being a family of a veteran is before service, and I find myself in these advocacy forums, and I find myself in these things, and they're going, even if you look at defence transitions and how they're doing transitions now, that's great. But they have this amazing graph that they put up, and they talk about periods of who comes into the transition. So defence works here, this works here, and they literally put family in the last month of transition on their little sliding scale. And I'm like, yeah, but that family, and what is a family? At the beginning of your career, it's a mum and dad. By the time you might have girlfriend in the middle there, you might have or boyfriend or a non-binary. I don't want to offend anyone. But, you know, you might have another wife, you might have 2 wives and 10 kids, you know, whatever that is, you've had a family that whole period of time. And I think involving and remember families are part of it. And I think, you know, sort of touching back on giving families access to information. So, you know, you look at it, and if I look at it, some of the deployments and, you know, some of the situations that I've heard of is, you know, Joe is deployed and Mary is struggling. So Mary goes to the unit and Mary says to the unit, I need Joe home. And the unit goes, Mary's now a problem. So Mary's a problem because she's whinging. Joe's deployed and so Joe at this point either needs to be a pain in the ass and come back and cause issues for the unit, or Joe stays and does what he wants and then loses his marriage, whatever that is, right? And that's not every scenario, but, you know, an example. But what if Mary had someone she could phone up and she could go, hey, I'm struggling because Joe's away. And they go, okay, what are you struggling with, Mary? And Mary goes, well, I need a little bit more respite. I can't keep on top of this. I can't keep on top of this. And then whoever it is in defence goes, well, do you know what? Actually, according to Pac-Man, we can fly your mum in for a little bit, or we can have a friend visit, or we can actually supplement you this amount of money. What would, you know, then Joe can stay on his deployment. Mary gets the help she needs. The marriage gets it. Like, it just seems there's so many things that seem so simple that I just go, I don't, you know, the information goes to the member and we leave it to the member to pass the information on. And then when it doesn't, and the member doesn't, we blame the member. Well, or is it a system that's set up to fail?
And what I'm getting from that is that there's so much bureaucracy and red tape that you, like, as you say, even just a padre, like go and check in and see how they're doing, and or, you know, how the kids, like, you know, and just we know it's tough. We know that, you know, Joe's overseas. Just hang in. We'll do it. Look, we might be able to cut his trip short, or whatever it is.
Yep.
But it just seems to be that there's that bureaucracy and that red tape that just stops things. That, you know, and as you say, you've seen it so many times, Em, that friends have busted up. Like, how many from the regiment have you seen where wives and husbands are no longer together? It's you and Mark would be a rarity that, you know, you've stuck through to where you guys are, and it hasn't been all glamorous. Like, there's been tough times, but you see more broken marriages than you do people together after a long period of. But defence don't seem to care about that. It's, you're doing the job, that you're good for when we do, like, we want you for the job, but then cut your way like a dirty nappy once you're no longer valuable, and that's it's terrible. It's terrible. So. Hopefully things will change, especially because you're advocating for it, and I'll say this, and you're like a fox terrier that will just keeps going and won't stop. You'll just keep going, and it's good because it's needed, because for too long it's been silenced, and we need people like you that are out there advocating, and that's what an advocate does. So keep that up. And so you did your open arms work, and through you were a lived worker, and this role, is it like basically being like a support to, is it like the wider, like for the non-listener, of what is Open Arms, what do they do?
So Open Arms is a government organisation, falls under Department of Veteran Affairs on a technicality or funding, and, you know, has psychologists, and the theory is that all the psychologists are supported and have an understanding of military service, and so they support the families of military members, so the veteran themselves, the wife of, and the children of, and parents where the veteran has suicided. So they support that, and they have an understanding of military. But then what they realised was that actually having lived experienced workers, so people who have understood what it's like to serve and to have deployed or to have had their own battle with mental health or gambling or addiction or whatever that looks like, that sometimes they're a soft entry point into psychologists, and sometimes people just want someone to bounce around ideas. And, you know, back I guess to the black humour, you know, you can say one joke to one person and you're a racist, and you can say another joke to another person, they go, okay, I get the idea of that. So, you know, and I think the other part of it was to then inform psychologists. So, one of my examples would be a psychologist was working with someone and she kept saying that he catastrophizes everything. And I'm like, okay, well, can you give me an example? And she goes, well, he had a UD at work, so an unauthorised discharge, and like he thinks his whole life is over. I'm like, that's not actually catastrophizing. That is actually a possibility because he's done this, and this is the feelings and this. And she's like, oh, right. And I'm like, so it's that sort of being able to contextualise what they might see as a civilian is one thing, but with a military lens, you go, look, absolutely, at the end of the day, I get you with your psychological hat, is he shot a blank round and no one was hurt. Absolutely. It is nothing. But it's not nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And like I get it too because it's, not watching a weapon properly. It's
giving away your position to the enemy.
That's right. There's a whole number of, and because that is your job. You like that weapon it's your tool. Yeah. You've got to be functional in using. And I get it and I understand. And that's where I think too. Psychology, and because you've done you've seen psychologists with your own mental health struggles, as have I. Sometimes they've got the best intention in the world, but they've got no lived experience, and you can't. And that's why when you went into the role in Open Arms, that lived experience, you've got it. You've had it. You can't train lived experience. It's okay. You can read in a book. You can have all the book smarts. But lived experience is a whole different... And I had Mark Donalson on the podcast, and he said that lived experience, sometimes the value in that is more than someone who has read it in a textbook, because there's some common ground. You can get a sense of, well, I've gone through something similar. I can understand, and there's that understanding as someone who's a psychologist goes, oh, well, yeah, it's catastrophic, doesn't understand the ramifications of, well, yeah, having a unnecessary firing of your weapon. Yeah, so I get it. So there's definitely more in that space needs to happen, and we've had the Royal Commission, and we'll see what happens there.
Sorry, I didn't need to make that.
No. Yeah. So
that's good, excellent.
Yeah,
so worthwhile.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's as my late friend said before he passed away tragically in 2023. I asked him about that question. I said, "Do you think it'll help?" And he said, "Mate, I hope so." He said, and it might give some people some closure, but he said, "Mate." And his words still ring true today, 2 years later. He said, I have my doubts. And I think you've only got to see with the government that there was, 200 and something things passed on, and have they implemented one of them? No. So what does that say? It's literally, if we sweep it under the rug long enough, well, the rug's a big bulging rug, but it's okay. And yeah, anyway, we'll leave it at that, because I don't want to go. This is about UM. It's not about politics. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. But you did that role with Open Arms, but you've moved into your current role as a veteran liaison officer with the Legacy Services. Yeah. Can you expand on this for our non-military listeners? What is Legacy, and what do you do in this role?
Yeah, so Legacy has been around for, 100 and something years. Sydney Legacy itself will have its 100th year celebrations next year. So, the history of Legacy is a conversation in a trench that was made from one soldier to another that said, oh, look after your family and kids. And I guess, that's still the true understanding of what Legacy is. So for any person who has lost their life in service, so overseas on operation, or has given their health now, which has been the latest shift, and that's mentally or physically given their health to service and have served operationally, then we come in and help the family. So, from everything as helping with the DVA compensation claims, working with ComSuper and filling out the paperwork to ensure the family get their gold card and their entitlements, to making sure that the children, depending on the age of the kid and where the family's at financially, paying for extra daycare sessions for the kid, for, so the financial aid we give, but also looking at supporting them through connections. Because I think, going back a little bit in that, where the family serves as well as the veteran serves, we have our own community of people. And when you take away that veteran, you take away that community for the family. So whether you take that veteran away by divorce, by death, by whatever that is, the family loses that connection to defence and defence relationships that they have. So Legacy has that opportunity to bring back defence wives from different eras. And, I think our oldest one at the moment is 103, our oldest widow.
Yeah.
But to see, and I've sat there and had conversations with some of the older widows, and to see that their life as a wife of a serving member was no different to mine, I think is equally parts frustrating, because I go, have we fucking learnt nothing?
Nope. Nope.
We can bond over something that, there's not a lot that, if I went out and had a conversation with another 102-year-old that would be so aligned.
And I think too, what it shows is that the only difference is, and I say this, and you're looking at yourself and the only thing that's changed is the world's got modern. From when the war was 100 years ago to where we are, or 110 years ago with the First World War, to where we are now. The only thing is, it's just the world's got modern. It's the same conversations. And as you say, have we not learnt anything from past wars? Like, it seems to be just this repeat, rinse, repeat, keep going. Maybe one day, and especially with you in these, in this role, maybe we'll see what happens there. But and you found a real passion now. This is where you are at the moment, and I can see the smile when you talk about it, because it lights up. There's purpose. There's you are changing the space, and well done to you on that. And we're nearly finished. And thank you for, giving up your time. I really appreciate you, and it's been awesome to have you on, but there's a few more questions yet before we wrap up. But when you joined the ADF, do you think women get the recognition that they deserve for their service? And if not, why do you think this is?
Apart from that really shit song that someone brought out ages ago. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
I'll have to forward it to you.
Okay, all right.
It was a really shit song that someone brought out that was 3 female veterans singing "I Wear My Medals on the Left."
Oh, actually, yes, I have.
So I feel that didn't help our cause.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is, I look at myself. And it's only been in the last 2 years I've started wearing my medals. Because honestly, I look at mine and I go, okay, these are my 3 medals. And then my husband's got like a rack. And to top it off, a Victoria Cross. And I'm like, it feels really pointless and I feel really inadequate. But I think there's a lot of that feeling of being inadequate. And I think, there is a really hard part of service that, I think so many females have had poor situations happen to them in defence, whether it be sexual assault, sexual harassment, or, and it is girls in a boys' world, and I look back at some of the horrific things that, people thought it was funny to, throw used condoms through my louver windows at Townsville because it was hilarious. And I go, there's moments like that. And I think, the other part is a big part is that operational service is still such a big part, and, Legacy ties it to service as well. And I think the more we tie having served on operations to being a veteran and to the importance of it, the less we're actually understanding what, we touched on it right at the beginning, any veteran would serve overseas and deploy if they had the chance. It is not their fault that they didn't. And I think so many females find themselves in that, whether they have a family or they choose to, and they will sacrifice their career. So they're, if they met, and so many marriages end up in dual military marriages, and I think another recruiting campaign, Army Defence, if you're listening, maybe if you reopen it back up 10 years after we've had our kids, I would literally go back in a heartbeat if somebody offered me the opportunity now that I've got that bit out of my system. And obviously I don't know if I could still do the physicality. I can shoot though, but I think there's that missing piece that we're still mothers in society and we're still going to have that role and responsibility, and that doesn't fit in defence.
Absolutely. We're just going to take a quick break and we'll come back. Welcome back after that short little break. And I think you're right that it seems to be that, like, you look at America for a comparison, that the veterans and first responders over there, they seem to be, they're treated so differently to how veterans and first responders are treated here in Australia. And I think they just, regardless whether you're female, male, over there, it's just, it's like the respect is there. Like they are so thankful for your service. And I think we've still got a long way to go here in Australia, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even looking at it on a perspective of, I think there needs to be so much more done in the female veteran space, in the medical sort of thing, because, there's no research pieces in Australia for the number of female veterans who have had, like I sort of touched on, problems with fertility. And, there's what's the link to the fact that, we go to some countries, and some countries you're actually not able to take, oh God, I can't even think of what they're called, the pill, because the pill's against, their country's religions and beliefs. So, I mean, it's fine. No, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say they can come here and... Anyway, but, you go over there and it's actually to take a pill is against whatever. So then we go on the marina or we go on the implant-on rod so that we're not having periods and it's actually not a daily thing. So now there's this whole, and you're encouraged to take fertility medication to be able to control and stop something that's a natural thing. Sorry for all those males out there listening. But, there was never once a question in my fertility journey of, oh, were you in service? Like, we never get asked that question. If you go in for mental health, they go, okay, so is it PTSD? Are you stressed? But they don't actually ask if it's defence-related PTSD.
Correct.
Or, they don't do that. And even if you look at DVA, I think they've changed it now, but a little while ago, I think it was 23% of erectile dysfunction is actually females.
Yeah, wow.
Because we don't have our own category for sexual dysfunction.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know it was that high.
Yeah. So you look at statistics like that I think, even we're not at the point where you want to tick on there that you're a female veteran or that you are a veteran on paperwork. So, and I even laughed that, as I said to you, I attend all these forums and it goes in there, you can attend this forum and it's a family and veterans forum. Are you a veteran or are you a family member? How are you attending? I can't tick both. So I have to choose one.
And see, that's ridiculous that you can't choose both because you are both.
Yeah.
You're attending with a family as a family member, but you're also a veteran yourself. So there's so many things that just are backwards still that make no sense. Like, it's just, anyway, we could go down a rabbit hole, but we won't. But what advice would you give for any young woman who is considering a career in the ADF?
I would have as many conversations with female veterans as you can. It's not unheard of if, little Timmy wants to join, that they will put him in contact with someone to have a conversation with. But I don't think we have that same network for female veterans. And I think having an understanding of what you're walking into, I think, be as fit as you can humanly be, because if you can take that burden off, then at least you're not going to get picked on for that. And, you know, be good and as competent as you can be as your job. Because if you show a minute bit of weakness, if you're not physically fit, if you're not strong, and I mean, I've got a beautiful friend who is super ridiculously fit, and, you know, she tried to do one of the direct entry courses and, you know, in the commandos, and was so fit and qualified, you know, was third or second in the number of push-ups and sit-ups and everything else that she'd done, and still had a hard time. So, you know, that's not actually going to make it. But I think really, if you're passionate about the role you're going into, and then unpacking all of that, my biggest lesson to anyone who wants to join the Defence, I think, is, you know, if you have the opportunity to join in a corps that will give you a skill to utilise afterwards, fucking do that one. Do that one. A clerk might seem like a shit job, and logistics might seem like a shit job, but by golly gosh, you can get some qualifications afterwards.
100%. And it's funny because when you talk to an infantryman, it's either they can go be a taxi driver or security. That's really it. There's not a lot of... It's a bit different for combat engineers or, you know, but even as you say, special forces. Well, what's your role? I'm a gunslinger. Well, going into, like, you know, back to civilian world. Yeah. Oh, what was your career? Oh, I killed people. Well, maybe we might push this one to the side. Like, but that's right. Find something. And hopefully the Defence will do, like, trade quals that actually transition out to civilian world, because otherwise, that's right. Well, what do you do if you do 10 years and then, well, what do you do afterwards? Like, and if you know that you've got a role to go to, it will help in the transition, because you'll find purpose moving forward quicker than if you go, well, I was going to be Defence my whole life. And
I think there's this whole societal shift too, that they go, oh, well, at least when you get out, you get a pension. I'm like, no, wait, it's not automatic. Like, you don't just get a pension. It's not like a politician who gets a pension for life. It's not like you have to actually go through a process. You have to apply. You have to actually be broken or recognised as broken. If you're actually come out and you're still physically capable and you're still able to do, you get zero pension.
And you know, the old DFRDB pension where, you know, that doesn't exist now. Like, a lot of the modern day veterans will not get their pensions till they're 60. No. So yes, they get their benefits and, you know, the white card and the gold, they go through that process, but their pension they don't get till they're 60. So, you know, it's not, here's the golden handshake, thanks for your service, see you later. It doesn't work like that. So, and that's right. It's funny how people isn't ignorant bliss. Anyway, we'll leave it at that one. But for you, what advice do you wish you had been given when you first contemplated joining the army, or soon after you joined?
Gosh, I think I don't know. I really don't know. I think being really confident and be really centred and stick to your personal values. I think if you can do that the whole time, you will come out of it with those still as central to you as a human.
I like that. That's really, and you know, it's be true to yourself and don't lose though, or don't, as you said, and you said it perfectly just before, where, you know, it was cruel what you said to Mark, but it was, you know, you can't have both. I'm not the pin-up wife. Like, be true to who you are, not what, I've got to be put on this when I'm not, it's not me. You know, as you say, you swear. I love it. I love what you're about, Ev. It's just, it's so good, because it's you. That's what makes you, and that's right. Don't ever lose. And any young person out there who listens to this, it can be confusing trying to find who you are, and you work through your 20s into your 30s, you know, and throw in being in Defence. You got to find who you are and hold true to that.
And I think sometimes that's the biggest piece with that veteran transition piece. When you look at, you know, someone who serves, whether a first responder, a police officer, defence member, and they join at that such young age, when everyone else is at university, playing with identities, wearing a dress if you want to wear a dress, going goth, whatever that is, and playing with those identities. You join and you're given one, and that's your identity, and you adopt it. And then when you're looking at 6 to 7, 10 years, however long that is that you get out, you're now an adult playing with identities that people have cemented their own identity back here.
Correct.
So they've had that 4 years of dicking around, and they now know who they are. And you're coming out as an adult where you should have your shit in one sock, apparently, according to society.
Yeah.
And going, Christ, I don't actually know what this identity is, and you're trying to play around with it when everyone else is cemented.
And you're regimental in that you've been, and this is what Army and Air Force, Navy, they do well. They break you down and build you up exactly how they want you. So they want the regimented, right, you will make a bed the certain way. You will fold your socks into a smiley face. You will... So they're very good at turning civilians into service personnel. They're shit at helping them transition back to being a civilian. And that's the thing. They were a civilian when they joined. Then they get indoctrinated into a different world. And it is a different world because you've lived it. It is a very different world. Same as being a first responder. It's not a normal life. You don't live a normal life. And then trying to find that transition when you finally do transition, that's why the struggle's there. Because, as you say, that identity's already been formed of who you were this is Emma for 20 years, that this is defence, this was my life, this is who I am. I don't know what it's like to remember what it was being a civilian. So definitely. So great advice. And what advice would you give to the wives and partners of defence personnel, because you've lived that life being both a veteran and the wife of a veteran? What advice would you give to anyone who is maybe take on a partner going into defence, or what advice would you give?
I think I remember I was given the opportunity at Open Arms, and I went to a beret presentation at 2 Commando, and there were a whole heap of families sitting in there. And it struck me at that moment, standing there in that presentation, that I go, Christ, I remember the excitement of being so proud of my partner getting his beret. I did not know what life that would bring for me after, I didn't, the days of knowing, what could happen, the fact, living every day that he could die, and I know it sounds like I'm trying to, but it was my reality, is that was a point. And I think, having something of your own, that would be my biggest one. So you're going to be asked to move. You're going to change locations. You're going to have to change friendship groups. Have something that's yours that you can take, whether it be yoga, a dance class, whatever that is, that you can take with you, and you can establish a new group with that. So when you go there, you can join a CrossFit group over there, and you'll have a new group that you can slot back into, because you will sacrifice so much of your life for that, and then when they come back, you stop, go, I'm not coming out to dinner, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that because I want to spend time. Stick to your dinners, do it. Just you need to maintain you in this.
Absolutely. And I think that's great advice. And then, the advice to SF operators is
run.
That...
Oh, no.
Yeah, sorry. No, run.
Say thanks for the night and then bail.
But it's all jokes aside, it's, as you say, broader army is a bit different, being a wife and a partner. It's a whole nother world, and Ian Langford said it really well. He goes, be prepared that SF is going to bite, and it's going to bite hard, and be prepared that you are going to go on that journey, and you certainly have, and all the wives, and and I'll say this, Em, you really you took it on in probably Australia's most busiest time period of we've never seen deployments like we did from 2001 to 2021. That was 20 years of just complete, if you, and often veterans say it, if you couldn't get a deployment in, and I'm not saying you, if you were serving in the Defence Force and you couldn't get a deployment in that time, you're either a malingerer or something, you know, because it was it was our busiest time of being in the military. Yeah. So it's going to bite hard. And for you, would you say be patient with your partner too? Would that be something that you would, being that...
Yeah, yelling doesn't always help. But yeah, be patient. And I think, you know, that was part of when you offered that opportunity for me to come on this podcast. I don't know how many, you know, will, but I think there is, for me, I have this driving, nagging worry that we have had these years of non-service, that where will be our opportunity to pass what we learnt and the skills we developed as spouses during that time to a generation that we are going to be so separated from. And I worry that there won't be that manual to go to.
And it's going to come again.
Yeah.
You've only got to look around the world. Yep. It's coming again, and we're not too far away. And I say that with dread and fear, and as you say, unfortunately, with the way, and we won't get into it, but I'll touch on it, the wokeness of how we've gone in the world, and also the army and police and all that. All our warfighters that have been warfighters no longer in the or there's not many left that are there, and the wives and that's right, as you say, it's opportunities like this to come on and you know, if someone hears it and goes, "Oh, that's exactly how I was," and I'm pretty persistent. And I got you at the end, so it was good when you said no, and then that's right, exactly. And I think too, who knows what the future holds for this world, and you know, who knows what the world will be like in the next 20 years. It scares me, and it probably scares you too. And being ex-defence, but we can only go day by day and live for each day. But I want to touch on. There's a few final questions, and Emma, looking back now, with over 20 years both full-time service and reserves, was joining the army still the best decision you made in your life, apart from marrying Mark and having your kids?
100%. Would do it, you know, touched on it, I would do it again tomorrow. And I was joking at work the other week, we were having a bit of a shit week at the work I was in. I was like, you know what, I remember being at high range, it was pissing down, I was absolutely soaking wet, the hoochie had a hole in it, and my bag was absolutely soaked. We'd had 36 hours of being in it on picket, and we'd had no sleep, and we were tired, and then we got bumped by, you know, the Missourians or whatever the shit fake army were at the time, and we had to pack up everything and move. And I said, and that was still more fun than this office job.
Well, I think every veteran first responder I ever talked to says the same thing. It was the best job they ever had, and not one, you know, serving your country. Two, it's the friendships you make for life, and you probably still talk to some of the girls that you went through, and even some of the boys that you met along the way. It's the best job of your life. Like, you know, you get paid to go and jump, or, you know, if you want to, go and jump out of planes and all the courses you did. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. How good's that? Like, and you're getting paid to do it. So exactly that. And as I say, it's you know, you'll never find another job like it. So, and it set you up for where you are now. And for you, how do you reflect on the friends you have lost, both from the unit and the families who have lost family members? How do you reflect? Do you take some time for yourself and grieve the loss?
I do. I do that, and, you know, at commemorative... Well, I don't really do Anzac Days or those sort of things unless we have to. It's on the individual day. But what I try to do is I try to live every day living a life that they didn't have the opportunity, because I don't want to squander that.
Well, they're forever young, aren't they? And that's why we say they shall grow not old, because they're etched forever that they are the age that they were when they passed away. And you know, you look at it too, like, and I do. I often look at the ages of, as we went through the 41 soldiers that were, well, it should really be 42, but 41. You know, 21, 26, 25, 25, 30, 40 for DIDs, like forever. And you look past now, and some people, and one of my veteran mates said, I've outlived my mate. Yeah. And that's why we say they shall grow not old, because as we the left grow old, and because we're privileged to grow old. Yep. So yeah, and and as you say, for you, Em, we've touched on it through the podcast that Anzac Day is very different for you guys now, because you as we've said, Mark's got the Victoria Cross. People come up and you can't just have a quiet time to reflect, because people see him and go, oh, that's Mark Donalson VC. We've got to go. And so really I understand why you would stay away from the crowds, because it's like, as you say, it takes away from the day, what the day is like. And it's no fault. It's just people are inquisitive to, and come up. So, and do you do that in your own, like, do you have your own sort of, like, what, do you reflect in your own way?
Well, we do. We either, depending on whether he is doing something official or not. But to be fair, I'm really quite selfish on Anzac Day, and I normally go, well, you know what, that important thing that you need to do is on you. It's not on me. So then I just go drinking with mates. So
that's good. That's the way it should be.
I go, it's my day too, buddy, and this is your problem.
That's it. I love that. Is awesome. That is such a good way to do it, and and that's it. Hey, it's you, buddy.
Yep, you did that.
Yeah, you did that action. See you, buddy. I love that.
Get on out.
That's so good. So, and for you, what are your plans going forward into the future with work and family?
Yep, I think moving forward, Mark and I bought a block of land a little while ago, and it's given us the bits that, when you unpack what you have in military, apart from the mates and apart from the identity and apart from, some of those things that everybody talks about, I think the bits that we realised were missing for us personally was you have to make decisions quickly. You have to think on your feet. You have to come up with plans outside the box. Every day needs to be different. And I think for us, that's what the property's given us. We need to come up with a solution of how to do this. How do we do that? So we need to be thinking with a military mind in a civilian environment. Also we get to shoot and hunt and do all the other cool things. But that's what that property's given us. So I think for us, it's actually brought us closer together. And, our kids are going to find their own way in life and do whatever they want, and we will always be there. But hopefully we'll be there with a really nice homestead with lots of hairy cows and sheep and, yeah.
Would you, if the kids came to you and said, Mum, Dad, we're thinking about going to defence, what would you say?
So one's a solid no on that. The other one, I think that's what it's going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But our advice, and that's only because they're really keen on doing university and they want to not have a HECS debt. So I think their thought is to go to ADFA, do studying and train like that. And I said, absolutely do not go in the army and change your last name. But apart from that, fully support you.
So how do people follow you if they want to get in touch with you, just to talk about the advocacy work that you do, or how do they follow you?
Yeah, just jump on my LinkedIn profile is probably best.
So one final question before I've got a quote to finish the podcast, and for you now, looking back and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would she listen?
No, she would not listen. There is not a hope of anything. She had made up her mind what she was doing. I think the only thing that I would have said to myself is, you have the strength to walk away from situations that you don't want to be in, and just remember that.
That's good advice, really good. So any young listener out there is, you're not always trapped in a situation. Back yourself and you can walk away from any situation. No, that's very good advice. Well, and what a story. Wow. It's, as I say, when you said to me at first, there's not really a story here. Well, we've nearly spoken we have now, actually. We've spoken for 3 hours. So it's just been an absolute privilege to have you on and share a different side, being, as I said at the start, a veteran, and thank you for your service, a wife of a veteran, and opening the door to a world that is not spoken of. And yeah, as I said, you're the first partner, wife that I've had on of a veteran, and that's why I knew in my own head that there was a story here of being one of your service and highlighting your service, bringing Mark's service, because it's unique in that there's a Victoria Cross that's attached to both of you. So normal life is not normal after that happens, but also, and the advocacy that you're now doing for veterans and veterans' families. And that's why I wanted to get you on. And your story is one of true grit. You've served your country with honour, and you've brought pride to your family. You continue to serve for veterans and veterans' families, and thank you for all that you do for veterans and veterans' families. And there's a quote that I believe sums you up, Em. A life not lived for others is not a life. Mother Teresa. And you continue to do that, and I want to thank you for coming on True Blue and sharing your story. It's been an absolute honour and privilege. So, Emma Donaldson, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.